multi-million-pound policy that's been marred by legal challenges, the Prime Minister called on Labour to back his emergency legislation. Israeli tanks are battling to reach Gaza's main southern city after ordering civilians to evacuate. Khan Yunis was hit by heavy bombardment overnight as the Israel Defense Forces advanced. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says international calls to end the war are inconsistent. Briefing his cabinet, he told the leaders of France, Germany and other countries, "You cannot, on the one hand, support the elimination of Hamas and on the other, pressure us to end the war, which would stop the elimination of the terror group." A mother has been charged with manslaughter after her two sets of twins died in a house fire in South London in 2021. The children aged 3 and 4 were home when the ground floor of the house became engulfed in flames. They were treated at the scene before being taken to 2 South London hospitals where they were pronounced dead. Police say 29-year-old Davika Rose is also charged with child abandonment and she's expected to appear in court tomorrow. The Mayor of London says the Met Police is chronically underfunded. In a letter to the Home Secretary, Sadiq Khan says London faces unique pressures as a capital city. He's urging the Home Office to boost the force's finances. He says the underfunding is highlighted by the challenge of the policing protests over the conflict in Gaza and Israel. Mr Khan warns the funding gap could now be as high as £240 million. Baroness Michelle Mone says she made an error in publicly denying her links to the PPE firm MedPro. It was awarded government contracts worth more than £200 million to supply personal protective equipment after she recommended it to ministers. The National Crime Agency is investigating the firm and its connection to the Conservative peer. Lady Mone argues she's being used as a scapegoat by the government for its own COVID failings. A judge has ordered the BBC to release emails related to Martin Bashir's controversial 1995 interview with Princess Diana. Mr Bashir officially stepped down from his job at the broadcaster in 2021 after it emerged he had secured the interview through deception and faking documents. Judge Brian Kennedy said the corporation had been inconsistent and unreliable in the way it dealt with the initial request to release material under the Freedom of Information Act. The material related to how the broadcaster handled the scandal when it came to light in 2020. And fresh weather warnings have been issued as Storm Fergus sweeps across the country. Yellow warnings for rain have been issued for the northeast of England, southeastern Scotland and northwestern Scotland. A yellow rain warning covering Carlisle to Sheffield is in place from 5 o'clock this afternoon until 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now back to Nana.
Thank you, Tatiana. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, before we get stuck into our head-to-head over the next hour, let me introduce you to my panel. So joining me today is former editor of The Labourist, Peter Edwards, and also Conservative peer and former advisor to Boris Johnson, Lord Daniel Moylan. Right, so here's what's coming up in head-to-head. Could the Tories be wiped out at the next general election? As Professor John Curtis says, the Tories could be reduced to as little as 130 seats. Is there any hope left for them? Then is Rishi Sunak's new bill doomed to fail, as the Star Chamber of right-wing MPs say that the plan isn't watertight? Could this be the bill that sinks Sunak? Of course, we're referring to Rwanda. And then could Boris Johnson return as Prime Minister alongside Nigel Farage? Many want him back as the one man who could perhaps beat Sir Keir Starmer. And if he partnered with Nigel Farage, well, could that be a dream ticket? And is it endgame for endgame, as Obid Scobie, or Scooby-Doo as some people call him? His book flops in the US. It's literally on the bottom of the list. I think it's on about 700 and something on the Amazon list. Could this signal the end of the road for Harry and Meghan as their star power finally runs out? All of that coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. So first up, Rishi Sunak's Conservatives could record the worst outcome in the party's history at the next election by collapsing to as few as 130 seats as the issue of immigration threatens to destroy the party. Sir John Curtis of the University of Strathclyde has said that immediately prior to the announcement of the new policies on immigration last week, the Tories were still on just 26% in the polls, with Labour enjoying a 17-point lead. He said that if these patterns were to be replicated in a general election, the outcome for the Conservatives could be bleak indeed, maybe as few as 130 seats. Now, this would be the worst outcome in the party's history. So joining me now is Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. So this is a somewhat worrying moment for the Conservative Party. What are the main things that have impacted? I mean, there's been a lot going on, but I thought Rishi Sunak had a few moments where he sort of bounced up a bit. So, for example, the movement with the 2035 for gas boilers and also electric cars.
I hate to tell you, Nana, but the truth is that if you go all the way back to where the Conservative Party stood in the opinion polls before those announcements to which you have just referred, the Conservatives were at 26 points in the opinion polls, 18 points behind Labour. In the polling that was done before the announcements on immigration last week, the Conservatives were still on 26%, although they were now just 17 points behind Labour because Labour was a point down on the middle of last September. Meanwhile, we have had 3 opinion polls conducted so far since the announcements last week on immigration. One of them shows no change, the other shows the Conservatives down 1, and the last one showed the Conservatives down 3. So far at least, it looks unlikely that the announcement on immigration, both legal and illegal, is going to move the polls any more than have the various other announcements and attempted resets during the course of the autumn. And the truth is that the Conservative Party under Rishi Sunak is finding it extremely difficult to recover from the pretty dire inheritance that Mr. Sunak took on from Liz Truss. The party's position has never been that much better in the polls than there was after Ms. Truss departed, and that's just seemingly been underlined by the way in which repeated attempts to try and seize the initiative haven't seemingly moved the dial.
Well, what about, where were they when Boris was in charge? Because they must rue the day that they got rid of him, because usually you get rid of a leader to do better.
Well, the truth is that by the time Boris Johnson was leaving Downing Street at the back end of August, the Conservatives at that point were around, between 8 and 10 points behind in the polls. So you are right, things are not as bad now as they were then. And you certainly might want to argue that the Conservatives will rue the day that they decided to make Liz Truss his successor, because that was the event, Liz Truss's fiscal event, and the associated reaction in the financial markets that resulted in Labour having the kind of double-digit lead they've had for the last a year or so. But the truth is that Partygate was the moment, and the first revelations about Partygate at the beginning of December 2021 was the moment when, for the first time, the Conservatives fell behind Labour in the polls. And, part of the legacy that the Conservatives are now trying to deal with, yes, is Liz Truss, but the other half of the legacy they're trying to deal with and the damage that was done is indeed Boris Johnson. The revelations about Partygate were the first moment when, as it were, the Conservatives fell behind in the polls for the first time, something from which they've never recovered.
But you could argue some of these polls are way off the mark. In your experience, does this feel like this poll could be way off the mark?
Well, I'm not looking at one poll here. This is taking an average. Actually, we're typically now getting 8 or 9 polls a week. I will be the first one entirely to admit to you that it may well be that the polls are exaggerating Labour's position. But let's put it like this. If the polls on average have Labour 17 ahead, even if we were to think of the worst possible error, maybe Labour are only 10 points ahead. that's still not going to be enough for the Conservative Party to form the next administration. The honest truth is the Conservative Party does really need to turn things around. Now, the point behind the projection I did was in the Sunday Telegraph today, saying that perhaps at the moment Conservatives are heading for 130 seats, was really, frankly, just to point out some arithmetical inevitability if indeed, and I accept it's if, the Conservatives were to fall to 26% in the polls, and that's what we're perhaps looking for in the immediate general election. There are 66 constituencies in which the fall in the Conservative vote since 2019, that 26% implies, i.e. 19 points, couldn't happen because the Conservatives didn't get 19% of the vote in these constituencies in 2019. In other words, if the Conservative vote falls on the scale to which the polls are currently pointing, they are going to end up losing votes more heavily in seats that they are trying to defend than the 19-point drop in the national polls. And I can show you one large mega poll that suggests that's indeed what's going on. Or if you really look at the results of last May's local elections, again, it was clear that the Conservatives were losing ground more heavily in places where they were previously strongest. And that's how you potentially at least end up with an outcome of 130 seats. And in a sense, what I was primarily trying to suggest to Conservative MPs is that, if indeed there is a risk that you're going to rock the Rishi Sunak's boat so substantially that you might end up perhaps accidentally precipitating an early general election, that perhaps is a fate that you really do need to avoid. Because at the moment, at least, you need to be aware of the risk that indeed the party could be heading for its worst ever defeat in an early election.
Crikey. Well, Sir John Curtice, thank you so much for talking to us. Great piece, by the way. I enjoyed that. Thank you. And of course, Sir John Curtice is the Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. Right, so let me welcome again to my head-to-headers Peter Edwards, former editor of the Labour List, and also Lord Daniel Moylan, former advisor to Boris Johnson. Daniel, I'm going to start with you.
Oh.
Your thoughts on this then, because the polls say that the Conservative Party are really heading for a landslide defeat. In your view, is there any way you think they could perhaps resurrect this?
Oh, I think it's going to be extremely difficult. I mean, the polls have been consistently, as Sir John Curtice said, have been consistently more or less the same since Rishi became Prime Minister. And he's tried to turn things round without success. The polls remain more or less where they are. I don't know the complicated calculations by which those percentages get turned into seats. I mean, I'd leave that to an expert like Sir John. Whether that's going to be anywhere between 100 and 200 seats, I wouldn't know. If he says 130, I'll go with that. But that's certainly a prospect at the moment. I'm not sure that I can see what is going to make it better. And one of the things that worries me is I think people have stopped listening to the Conservative Party in some way. So it doesn't matter what they say, what we say. They're not really listening to us anymore. But I do think that if we don't get the small boats issue sorted, then we're certainly toast. Because it's not only is it an immigration issue, it's a competence issue. It's one of your 5 pledges, one of Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges. You promised you'd deliver on it, and it's visible. We can see it. The other pledge is a little bit more fuzzy, not quite so visible, but we can see this. Are people still landing in small boats? And if you don't actually sort it out, then I think you are in a very, very difficult position indeed.
Madness for him to say that he was going to stop them. I don't know what he was thinking. Peter Edwards.
Well, Labour won't be complacent. They'd be mad to take it for granted.
But they've been complacent for a lot of this, though, haven't they?
No.
I mean, they haven't had to do anything, frankly. I mean, I don't blame them.
But Labour have not been complacent. Every time you talk to a Labour activist, a party staffer, an MP, they're super risk-averse. They take nothing for granted. In my lifetime, Labour's lost a lot of elections. So John Curtice is obviously hugely knowledgeable, highly respected. It's notable that he caveated what he was saying quite carefully. So there's one scenario where Tories go down to 130 seats, but so John Curtice didn't predict that. He just said if X, Y and Z happens, then that could be one outcome. Let me say a couple of other things. First of all, the starting point for Labour, Daniel's right, Labour have a consistent poll lead. Which moves around. Labour's starting point is much worse than in 1997 when Tony Blair got a majority of 179. The last general election under Corbyn, Labour went backwards, so the starting point is much worse. I think the worry for Rishi Sunak will be that what his advisors call moments, key moments, have not made a difference. So the party conference speech, the budget, the cabinet reshuffle, these moments haven't really delivered much of a change in the polls. So that, I think, what will worry Rishi Sunak's team.
Because I don't see them really... I can't imagine what they can do to change things up. And in particular, the fact that Rishi Sunak didn't appear to listen to his advisers with regard to Rwanda to sort of tighten up that policy. We'll be talking about that in a little while. But who do you think is mopping up a lot of these votes then? Because if we do see a huge landslide, do you get the sense that people will go to Reform, or do you get the sense they'll just go for Labour?
Well, clearly some people, according to the polls, some people are going to the Reform Party, which is up on around 10%, which is large for that party. Call it Reform, call it Brexit Party, call it UKIP. For a general election, that's quite a large number for them, and clearly people are moving in that direction. I think quite a lot of Conservative voters are moving to stay at home. I think a lot of people who won't actually go and vote. Whereas I imagine the Labour vote will be quite strong. I mean, people who want Labour will turn out because they'll feel this is their chance to get a Labour government that, you know, they want. So I don't know quite where they're all going, but some are going to Reform and some are staying at home.
I think a lot of people have slightly given up on all of this because there was a moment where the Labour Party and the Conservative Party seemed to be literally the same thing, and there are very little differences between the two parties. What are the main differences in policy for the main policies? So, for example, Rwanda, Peter, because I'm still at a loss to understand what the Labour Party are planning to do about that.
Well, I've spent most of my adult life in the Labour Party, and to me, Labour and Tories have never looked the same. But I do understand some people are disenchanted with politics, do take that view, and it's kind of the job of the parliamentary party and sort of low-grade people like me to try and persuade them otherwise. On Rwanda, Labour said they would not go ahead with it, and they'd use the money, which seems to be rising every month, into setting up a new directorate within the National Crime Agency to tackle some of these issues around illegal migration.
Well, listen, stay with us. We've got loads more to discuss. Thank you for that, Peter. It's just coming up to 19 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I mean, who are you going to vote for? Do you trust any of the parties? Are you going to go for someone completely different? Will it be like Argentina, where we find a brand new party literally emerging? So coming up, though, what do you think of this? Could Boris's return as Prime Minister? Some Tories MPs are hoping that he'll team up with Nigel Farage. Could that potentially save them at the next election? Next, though, as the Star Chamber finds Rishi Sunak's Rwanda plans are not up to scratch, could this bill sink Sunak's time in number 10?
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
23 minutes after 3. Welcome aboard if you've just tuned in. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua, and we're going head-to-head. And doing that this hour is the former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards, and also Conservative peer, Lord Daniel Moylan. So, the next topic, a Star Chamber of Conservative lawyers have concluded that Rishi Sunak's Rwanda deportation plans are not fit for purpose. Now, the group made up of right-wing MPs from the European Research Group, the New Conservatives and the Common Sense Group came to the conclusion that the bill will fail in its objectives to provide the legal protections needed to allow deportation flights to take off for Rwanda. Peter, Daniel, what do you think? I'm going to start with you, Peter.
I don't think it's morally the right thing to do because I think it's outsourcing our responsibilities. But on a purely practical level, it seems like it's not going to happen. I'm not saying it's dead, but it seems unlikely. And if the proverbial alien had landed from Mars and would say, well, the British government tried to do something involving sending people to Rwanda in 2021 and it wasn't successful. They tried again in 2022 and it wasn't successful. They tried again in 2023 and it wasn't successful. You know, it just seems very unlikely to work. We're spending more money. And I think my other concern is really that it eats up airtime in the Tory party, who are still the governing party, and there's about 28,000 people crossed the Channel this year in small boats. Even if the Rwanda policy is successful, which I hope it won't be, it would only be to send a few hundred. So it's a minuscule proportion.
But their argument is that the few hundred won't be prepared to be the first few hundred. So if you're going to spend 5-10 grand getting on a dinghy to go across the Channel and you know that plan is operating and you know that you'll be one of the first, then you're not going to want to do that. And the idea was to break the smuggler's model. So that was the plan.
Well, that's I'm interested in Daniel's thoughts, but I suspect people who are desperate enough to embark on such a journey aren't, and this is not intended to be sarcastic, just are not following what's going on in British politics. They're not following Rishi Sunak. They're not following the House of Lords. They have more immediate concerns. So the deterrent factor, I think, fades away.
Peter just very succinctly told me he doesn't want to hear what I have to say. Daniel?
I absolutely disagree about the approach. I think the fact is that if you were going to spend, just say you're going to spend £10,000 or £5,000 or something on a Caribbean cruise, and you were told there was a reasonable chance that you wouldn't be going on the Caribbean cruise, you'd be spending a fortnight locked up in Clacton, but you wouldn't get your money back. You'd think very, very carefully before you actually spend that money. That's not a very, people might say it's a frivolous comparison, but it's that sort of thing. And I think you don't need to send a lot of them in order to have that deterrent effect. And people do know what's happening. And, of course, it's our job, the government's job, to make sure they know what's happening, because they're sitting there on the other side of the Channel. I mean, they can have leaflets, they can have messages distributed to them telling them this is what's happening. Give them free newspapers if they want to see it. They've all got mobile phones. They're watching what's happening on the news. So I think the approach is right. But I think it's possible to overhype what's actually happening at the moment in the Conservative Party. So I haven't read the detailed, I don't think anyone's even seen the detailed legal opinion that's been produced by this so-called Star Chamber. But it appears from the newspaper reports that they're saying that the bill is sort of 90% OK, but has left a few loopholes open, which through amendments could be changed. Now, that isn't a reason for voting the bill down on Tuesday, which is second reading. That would kill the bill completely. That's a reason for letting it through, tabling the amendments in the new year when the bill is in its committee stage and report stage, and then seeing if they get through then and taking a view at that point. And the same, you know, the One Nation group, I think they do accept, I think, most of them, that this policy of Rwanda is the government's policy and is the policy they're signed up to. They're concerned about, again, their marginal type, their issues about, does it just go too far in a certain direction, whereas the others is it going quite far enough? So it's a gap rather than a great clash of principle. So I in a way, think that there's quite a good chance that, you know, is this the Rishi moment where he loses the vote? That's possible on Tuesday, but I don't think that's really what we're heading for.
But could it not be blocked by the House of Lords?
But then it'll absolutely be blocked. I'm sure it'll be blocked by the House of Lords, and there's nothing the government can do on current timetables, I'm advised, to get it through the House of Lords, even though in the end the Commons can always force its will on the House of Lords. There is a process for doing that, very rarely used, but through the Parliament Acts. But there are timetables built into the Parliament Acts, which I think I understand it's now very difficult, if not impossible, for the government to achieve before a general election. So, so the Lords, I think, will almost certainly block the bill as it stands. Because they're right up, you know, they've got this thing about rule of law, which is their conception of rule of law, which is a modern European conception that isn't British at all, that they're foisting on everybody.
But Peter is saying that it's immoral and that we're outsourcing our responsibility. Why is that immoral? Where would you put, you know, if you have a lot of people coming, rather than sort of encouraging others to come across, you have to do something about that to deter people.
Yeah,
so what would the Labour Party do then?
Well, first, on the first point, why is it moral? So I've been to Rwanda, and I'm conscious that many people with some of the most, this is not a jibe at Daniel, but some of the people with the most strident opinions have no knowledge of Rwanda. I don't believe Rwanda, after a genocide, has the infrastructure to deal with this.
Well, there was a genocide. I mean, there was a genocide in Germany. We've forgiven that and still we're moving and working with the Germans, and it wasn't long after that we carried on working with them.
Well, the Rwandan genocide, as horrific as it was a lot more recent, sadly, than the Second World War. Anyway, sorry.
But those sort of things aren't... We were probably working with Germany quite quickly after the genocide. That's what I'm saying. So even though now you're going, oh, well, yeah, it was a long time ago. Yeah, but what period of time did it take us to start working with Germany after the genocide? So that's what I'm saying here.
Well,
with
Britain, obviously, the number of people lost both in the Second World War and in the Holocaust were truly horrific. Britain was involved in reconstruction within Germany fairly early on, and there was a British presence in Germany for many years after war. But that was about reconstructing a kind of a shattered Germany. So I think it's a very different scenario.
Well, we are, in a sense, going in and building something in Rwanda for our prisoners. For people, not prisoners, but people who have come to this country via the Channel, what many will deem as illegally. And they are there being processed. I can't see us working with them. There's no any different to us working with Germany a couple of years after. You know, like you're saying, it's moral grounds. So I'm just challenging your grounds for morality.
It's completely different because this is not Britain saying we're going to invest in Rwanda because we need to support them. Although, to be fair, British governments have done that.
They have done, yes.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
part of the Commonwealth as well. So we have been investing in that.
So British governments over the last 20 or 30 years of various different political stripes have invested in Rwanda, but the Rwanda scheme we're talking about now is not that at all. It's the British Conservative government saying it's unable or unwilling to fulfil its own responsibilities to people it judges to be illegal migrants, so it's going to pay someone else to do the job for them.
Can I ask Peter a question there? If it wasn't Rwanda, let's say we had an island that was British that we could move them to. I mean, we do have overseas territories. I'm thinking now about Australia, because this scheme is largely copied from what Australia successfully did with the boat people arriving there. And they relocated them they located them on an island which I believe belonged to Australia. So the question of having to have a treaty with a foreign country didn't arise. If we were able to do that, would you still object to it?
Yes, I think I would, and I'm not comfortable with the
idea. That's more interesting.
Idea with outsourcing.
But it's not outsourcing
to
if it's to British
or another island. I mean, Lee Anderson, a presenter on this channel and a Conservative, I think he's a backbencher. He's vice chairman. Talked briefly about sending illegal immigrants to a British island, like somewhere in the Outer Hebrides or in the Shetlands. I mean, I'm very dubious about that as well. I think the concept of putting people on an island because the state is not equipped to deal with them.
Well, they're not meant to. But that is where the state would deal with them. That is where they could be processed and returned from there. Whereas at the moment, that doesn't happen. And
but isn't that a dumping ground? Why can't we use
a dumping ground?
mainland
It's
Britain?
a processing area.
Well, Britain.
Why does it? If it's in one part of Britain or another, why does it matter? At least you'd have a processing area where they could be processed and sent away.
OK, so why does it matter why I'm against it? I think, one, because it's demeaning to individuals. I think, two, because it's the British state failing to fulfil its duties. 3, it's very expensive. And 4, it's not working. Remember, the Labour had this quote, we've sent more Home Secretaries to Rwanda than illegal migrants.
Yeah, well, that's because of all the legal challenges.
Yeah, but that is a Rwanda issue. I'm really interested in why you'd object to doing this in a place that was under British control, where you wouldn't have the issues about Rwanda and all the questions of genocide that you understandably raise. Why you would object to doing that?
Yes, I have answered that, but I'm happy to answer it again, which is I don't believe in the idea of a dumping ground.
Well, you decided it's a dumping ground. They wouldn't be there very long.
Well, I think it would be treating human beings like that. And also, I mean, Daniel's giving me a very quizzical look, but plenty of other people have had the same objections, including the Archbishop of Canterbury, who's not aligned.
Well, look, I don't necessarily... A lot of people don't agree with him either, and perhaps he'd like to house some of them in the churches that he's in. Well, listen, stay with us. This is GB News, 33 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, could Boris make a surprise comeback as Prime Minister? Many Conservatives think that he is the only man who can save them from Keir Starmer. But first, let's get your latest news with Sophia.
Thank you, Nana. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. GB News understands tomorrow Tory MPs will give their verdict on whether the Rwanda bill is workable. Conservative MP Sir Bill Cash will present the findings ahead of the Crunch second vote on Tuesday. The Prime Minister has come under pressure after it was discovered he paid £240 million towards the Rwanda plan without a single flight taking off. Tory sources say the MPs will decide whether to support the legislation tomorrow or, if necessary, hold a second meeting ahead of the vote that evening. The Labour leader will warn the Tories can no longer govern the country because warring camps are, as he describes, fighting like rats in a sack. In a speech on the same day as the scheduled vote on the government's Rwanda policy, he'll claim it's Labour that shares Britain's values. Despite the pressures over the £240 million policy that's been marred by legal challenges, the Prime Minister called on Labour to back his emergency legislation. Baroness Michelle Mone says she made an error in publicly denying her links to the PPE firm MedPro. It was awarded government contracts worth more than £200 million to supply personal protective equipment after she recommended it to ministers. The National Crime Agency is investigating the firm and its connection to the Conservative peer. Lady Mone argues she is being used as a scapegoat by the government for its own COVID failings. McDonald's has apologised after footage posted on social media showed a security guard mopping the floor where a homeless man was sitting. The video was taken on Victoria Street in London last night and shows a man trying to move his sleeping bag and duvet away from the water as it seeped underneath. In the video, he says, "Leave me alone," before one security guard kicks a blanket out of the way and splashes more water along the pavement. McDonald's said it was shocked and saddened by the footage. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com. And now it's back to Nana.
God, that poor guy. Well, stay with us. Coming up, you'll hear my monologue on Nigel Farage as the nation waits to see if he'll be crowned king of the jungle tonight. Let's make sure he is. Make sure you download the I'm a Celeb app and cast your 5 free votes, and votes remain to keep Nigel in the jungle.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet?
What is this?
It's
my new
It's
teeth.
your new
Yes, I
teeth.
know.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app for free and you can see all the programmes on the channel. I'm Nana Akua. It's just coming up to 40 minutes after 3 o'clock. We're going head-to-head in a clash of minds, and this is the next topic. Boris Johnson could return as Prime Minister under astonishing plans being hatched by Tory MPs, with a dream ticket leadership tie-up with Nigel Farage even being considered. Conservative MPs reportedly believe that bringing back the former Prime Minister is the only way to save the party from electoral oblivion, with even Nigel Farage, hopefully soon to be king of the jungle, eyed up to be his partner on the dream ticket. I don't know whether that's madness or not, so joining me to discuss, Peter Edwards and Daniel Moylan. Daniel, what do you think?
Well, I think first of all, somebody from Nigel Farage's camp. I mean, Nigel, of course, doesn't know anything about this, apparently, because I understand he's cut off in the jungle. But somebody from Nigel Farage's camp has said a joint leadership with Boris Johnson would end in tears in 5 minutes. And I think that's absolutely right. I don't think you can have two big beasts like that jointly leading anything. And I think it would collapse very quickly. That's a different matter from asking the question, should Boris, what would the result be if Boris were somehow leader of the Conservative Party today? And I've no doubt it would be better, partly because Boris hasn't got the issues about legitimacy that have arisen in relation to Rishi Sunak and indeed to less so to Liz Truss, in that, he was actually the leader of the party when it achieved the very large majority which constitutes this parliament. And he's not there anymore, and he's not there because he's been forced out largely by his own side. So I think there is something to be said for that. Is there a role for Nigel Farage in the Conservative Party? I think it's difficult, and Nigel has to sort of make his mind up, but the policy at the moment of reform, which he's, I believe, life president of or something, so he isn't totally disconnected from the Reform Party, even though he's not actively campaigning. The policy of the Reform Party is to destroy the Conservative Party in the elections. So I don't see how you can be the leader of a part of the leadership of the party which says we want to destroy the Conservative Party and at the same time say I'd like to be joint leader of it. It lacks a sort of a clarity, a compelling message, should we say.
But they would probably, the Conservatives now would probably do anything. It's almost like they're thinking, well, if we...
No, I think it's quite interesting. I don't think the Conservatives would do anything. I think, if I take up a couple of seconds, probably too long, the first thing we'll notice is that I think it's already 75 MPs have said they're not going to stand at the next election. Because everyone says, the Conservative Party, when they're looking defeat in the face, they will do anything to save themselves. 75 have already said they're not standing at the next election, and that number, there's more than 75, but there are people who know they're not standing, but haven't yet made that announcement. So there will be, the best part, those people are not interested in saving the Conservative Party anymore. They are votes for the status quo, they're votes for an easy life, because they're out of it. They're not looking to save their seats, they're gone. And so there's this whole idea that, the Tory party en masse is going to move and take action. It's not. It's becoming more and more lethargic. And more resigned. More resigned to these issues. Because a lot of people, that's not quite true. There are MPs standing down for other reasons because they've reached a certain age or for health reasons or whatever. But some of them are standing down, I suspect, because they've decided they're not going to win. And what's this for a game of soldiers? So that large number is effectively a vote for the status quo. It's a vote for doing nothing. That's what I'm trying to say. And so the idea that the Conservative Party is going to spring into action and resolve everything is I think, a little bit overstated. They're punch drunk and lethargic.
Peter Edwards.
I think the chances of Boris and Nigel Farage teaming up and ending up being the Conservative Party running government are pretty much close to zero. Neither of them are MPs. Boris Johnson was forced from office, not by the electorate, by his own party. Sadly, the people that knew him best decided they didn't want him. Then when the House of Commons Privileges Committee found against him over the Downing Street party scandal, rather than staying in fighting his corner, he quit. When he stood for election after David Cameron quit to be leader of the Tory party, he quit that. There was a great hullabaloo a few months after he left 10 Downing Street that he might stand again, and he published a picture of him on the telephone by Union Jack, and he quit that unofficial race as well. He's got a record of not making it to the starting line, and the way you can guarantee your own failure is by resigning your seat in the House of Commons, which he has done.
Well, I think that's a little bit unfair, because the reason he quit in most of those instances is because he knew he'd be pushed out, so he might as well go. I mean, that by his own party, by his own party. Well, a lot of them, I'm not. Don't even get me started on Keir Starmer and Beergate and a lot of things that may have gone under the radar. That
Keir Starmer was investigated by the police and cleared, so that's the opposite of going under the radar.
Well, not so much.
The very opposite.
Well, there were stories that appeared to be told. For example, Angela Rayner wasn't there, and then she was. It was only an impromptu gathering, which
it was cleared by the police. Do you accept the outcome?
Well, the outcome is the outcome, but I don't accept it. No, I think he did it just as badly as Boris on that. I think if you're going to penalise Boris for that, I think if you're going to penalise Boris for what he supposedly did, then I think that you should, on that balance, then also penalise Keir Starmer, because I see very little difference.
There's no evidence at all.
There is evidence. I mean, look. I mean, I don't want to get too much involved in that, but let's be honest. We know that Keir Starmer lied when he said that Angela Rayner wasn't there, because she was. She's a force of nature. You wouldn't not notice her. He said that it was an impromptu gathering, and it turns out there was a memo there. He said there were only a few people then. It turned out there were some, I don't know, 19 or something, and that's only because he was found out with a bill that showed that there were over £200 spent. I think, personally, that they are, if you're going to have a go at Boris about this, you should also be having a go at Keir Starmer.
You can have a go at anyone, and you've got a platform to do that, but to say Keir Starmer lied when he's been investigated by the police is completely inappropriate.
Well, I've just given you the facts. He gave some information that wasn't true. Was Angela Rayner... OK, I'm not arguing about the police investigation, but I'm not going to repeat this.
Than the police?
I'll say it... OK, so did Keir Starmer say that Angela Rayner was at the party or not? What did he say?
I can't remember, but the police...
Well, I've just told you. OK, hold on, stop talking. So he lied because he said Angela Rayner wasn't there and she was. What would that be? What would you call that?
I think you're digging your grave legally.
What would you call that?
You're digging your grave legally.
I don't think I am.
He lied when he's been investigated by the police who did not found he lied.
Well, was it true that Angela Rayner was there or wasn't?
I can't remember, but
well, I can.
No evidence.
She was there and he said he was.
There's no evidence he lied.
So what would you call that?
An error.
Oh, right, that's a big error. OK. All right, well, that's fair enough then.
But you're saying he's lied, but you haven't offered any evidence to support that point.
I've just given you the evidence. I've given you a few instances that were simply not true. I've just told you them. So that's why I'm saying that I think both he and Boris, I think if you're going to put Boris in trouble for that, then I think he should also be in trouble as well. I don't need to spend any more time on this because the facts are there.
Boris was fined and Keir Starmer was cleared.
He was fined, and I have no idea why that would be the case.
They're a world apart.
I think they should have both been fined if you're going to fine anybody, or not at all.
Even if the police investigated found someone didn't break the law, you still want them fined?
Who's interviewing? Is it you or me?
But I think you said something that's very inappropriate.
But I've said something that's true.
Ask Daniel. It's not true that Keir Starmer lied. It's not true that Keir Starmer lied.
I'm not going to be the judge in this. It's not very interesting.
Yeah,
the fact is that the way in which the police... we need to go back to the whole basis of the lockdown. I mean, I remember seeing in the House of Lords the laws that we had to approve, statutory instruments, that changed the lockdown at different points. When the rules changed, there'd be a change in the law. Documents that thick, which were almost unreadable, specified with detailed specifications. And I remember saying in the House of Lords that this is not, these decisions are not suitable for legislation. Nobody can enforce this. It's almost impossible to enforce these regulations fairly. Nobody can even read or understand them from day to day. And ordinary people, I don't mean shopkeepers or people who have an investment in a business that they have to keep running, but ordinary people like you and me, we have no idea what the law actually is. It ended up being reduced to a bit of guidance, followed by being reduced to 3-word slogans. That's what we were, face, space, whatever, bumps-a-daisy, that we had to remember at a particular time. And nobody actually knew what the law exactly was. And it was very different in workplaces, where people were allowed to go. People were not prohibited from going to their workplace in certain circumstances. And everyone accepts that going into work at number 10 was a legal and proper thing to do. There was a law
against having a party.
No, there was no... Well, there was no... Let me finish. The word party never appeared in that legislation.
Social gathering.
The word party never appeared in that legislation, for example.
Non-essential social gathering?
I don't know what appeared in the legislation, but the word party never did. So there was no law against having a party. There were laws against gatherings, and the question is whether, if you're sitting in an office, there was never a law against drinking alcohol. That was never in the legislation. And if you're sitting in an office working, and then 1 minute, and then the next minute you're sitting in an office working with a glass of wine next to you, whether you've broken the law, why have you broken the law? Now, I accept Boris got a fine. I'm not saying he didn't get a fine. But all I'm saying is it's almost impossible for anyone to know in good faith a lot of the time whether they were breaking the law or not.
I totally agree with you.
No, I remember sitting in Hyde Park for a moment. I sat down. I went for a long walk. I was allowed to walk. I was allowed out once a day. Going for a walk in Hyde Park, resting my weary bones for 5 minutes on a bench and being politely moved on by a mounted police lady. I mean, of course I complied, but I wasn't allowed to sit on the bench all of a sudden. Why? What was all that about? Who invented that? It said nothing in the law about... It said nothing in the law about sitting on benches.
You can't have non-essential social gatherings. You could go to the office where appropriate. Well, I went to the office within the rules.
But some people might argue...
You could sit at your desk and drink all day if you wanted.
I was too busy to
you were probably
to do that.
You were probably too busy. I grant you. But you could have done, and you would not have been breaking the law.
Because it would not have been a party. I would have been drinking on my own in this hypothetical scenario.
You'll be lucky to have an office all to yourself.
Well, what he just said is there was no actual anything saying actual party. So I hear you. Look, I think a lot of people were confused about the rules anyway.
The whole thing was nonsense.
It was a bit nonsense. It became silly at the end. A lot of people were confused about the rules. Your bubble when you're at work, this and that. Could you drink? It was confusing. Let's be honest.
You could always drink. They never ever prohibited drink.
Yeah. So, but to me, I still think that, you know, if you're going to put out fines for people doing that, then I think they should have also fined Keir Starmer. That's my view. But what's yours? By the way, lots of you have been getting in touch on Nigel Farage. Stella says the Tories need Nigel Farage, but he doesn't need them. Better the Red Wall and right-wing Tory MPs join Reform UK to gain support from all sides. On Conservatives, Martin says, I think all Boris's problems were generated by the far left that now controls the civil service. Liz Truss's problems were again generated by the left and the Bank of England dumping bonds onto the market. Everyone seems to forget this. The problems we had date back to Blair when he gave too much power to the civil service. Now they don't want to give it back. Right, we'll stay with us. Keep them coming. Great messages, by the way. But on to this one. Omid Scobie, or Scooby-Doo, or some people call him Scobies, his latest work, Endgame, released 10 days ago, and has already fallen out of the Amazon top 10 bestsellers list. I think it's somewhere in the region of 700 or something. Now, many believe that the book has bombed in the States and in the UK because of Harry and Meghan's star power, which has fallen dramatically. It comes as the royal family have today released their Christmas card designs. The King and Queen and Camilla shared a photo of them wearing their robes and crowns in Buckingham Palace's throne room for the coronation. So meanwhile, the Prince and Princess of Wales have released a lovely photograph of their family. So Peter and Daniel, what do you think? Peter, are you tempted to read Omid Scobie's book?
No, I don't think so. I'm not too bothered by how many books he sells to a sequel. It's not really my area of interest. But I think, you know, I believe in balance. I think Prince Harry and his wife Meghan, I think they took a decision after the first book. They were going to kind of try and go quiet for a bit. They had a lot of negative publicity over a bit of a run-in with American police where they live. So I think they, in terms of media, took a tactical decision to go quiet.
Well, that worked out well, Daniel.
I've never... I mean, I wish great happiness to the Duke and Duchess. Beyond that, I take very little interest in their affairs and activities. I've never read a book about them.
No.
So I wasn't proposing to read this one. I do have a view on the Christmas cards, though.
Yeah, lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, well, given a choice, I mean, you know, I don't know if your viewers can actually see the Christmas cards, but I would go for the one. If I were a member of the royal family, I'd definitely dress up and wear the robes and the crowns. I'd go for that one.
That's so cute.
The other one here, I'm not entirely convinced what this is conveying to me, except that they have very good laundry operation, and that the shirts are brilliantly white.
Well, that's good.
And that's good, but it's not really telling me much about them, except that they're a family. But that's lovely.
I think it's lovely. They're united.
Yeah.
Well, listen, stay with us. There's loads more here on GBNews. Still to come, the Great British Debate. I'll be asking, is the Rwanda plan a gimmick? I'll bring you some weather. Don't forget to stay tuned for my monologue, which is up next.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glazier. Low pressure still very much in charge of our weather over the next couple of days, bringing us some unsettled conditions and some wet and windy weather on the way. Storm Fergus, named by Met Erin, slowly continues to move its way towards the UK through the rest of Sunday and into Monday. This will bring rain spreading its way across parts of Scotland, and this rain already falling on some very saturated ground, with further rain pushing across northern parts of England through the early hours of Monday morning. Some very strong winds too, particularly across western parts of Wales and through the Bristol Channel, where we could see those gusts up to 60 miles an hour. Temperatures across the south around 7 or 8 degrees, but across parts of Scotland we could see down to -1 or -2, with some icy stretches, particularly for southwest Scotland through the early hours of Monday morning. Elsewhere, though, Monday generally starts a drier and brighter day for most of us. Plenty of sunshine as we head through the afternoon. Perhaps a few showers skirting in across northern parts of England and eastern Scotland as well, seeing those showers continue to push in from the coast. But with those lighter winds and with some sunshine perhaps feeling a little more pleasant than recent days, around 12 degrees in the south and generally around average further north. Tuesday starts a cloudy and wet picture again as rain continues to push northwards into parts of Scotland, again already falling on that very saturated ground. So some localised flooding here. That sets us up for further rain through the rest of Tuesday and into Wednesday, but perhaps hints of something a little more settled on the way through the latter half of next week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
So welcome aboard. This is GB News. Now, there's loads more to come in the next hour. My monologue is on Nigel in the jungle and Anton Deck's hypocrisy. Stay tuned. I've got a couple more emails to read, though. We were talking about the candidacy and Reform and Nigel Farage. Rachel says, I would vote for Reform UK, but there isn't a candidate in my constituency. When is Reform getting its act together and giving us a candidate we can actually vote for? And then John says no to Boris's return. He did a great job on Brexit, but a rubbish job on everything else, especially the economy. It would also be a big disaster if Nigel were to team up with him. Well, listen, stay tuned. My monologue is on the way next.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. For the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Before we get started, let's get your latest news with Sophia.
Thank you, Nana. Good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Some breaking news in the last hour. Met Police say 2 teenage girls have been arrested on suspicion of the robbery of a Jewish woman in North London. A warning, these images might be distressing. Footage of the attack has been circulating on social media of the 20-year-old Jewish woman walking in Stamford Hill on Thursday afternoon. 2 women approached her from behind. She tried to evade them by crossing the road when the assailants pull her to the ground, kicking and punching her. The Met Police says it's keeping an open mind about the motive for the attack, but are treating it as a possible hate crime. GB News understands tomorrow Tory MPs will give their verdict on whether the Rwanda bill is workable. Conservative MP Sybil Cash will present the findings ahead of the crunch second vote on Tuesday. The Prime Minister has come under pressure after it was discovered he paid £240 million towards the Rwanda plan without a single flight taking off. Tory sources say the MPs will decide whether to support the legislation tomorrow or, if necessary, hold a second meeting ahead of the vote. Israeli tanks are battling to reach Gaza's main southern city after ordering civilians to evacuate. Khan Yunis was hit by heavy bombardment through the night as the Israel Defense Forces advanced. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says international calls to end the war are inconsistent. Briefing his cabinet, Netanyahu told the leaders of France, Germany and other countries, "You cannot, on the one hand, support the elimination of Hamas, and on the other, pressure us to end the war, which would stop the elimination of the terror group." A mother has been charged with the manslaughter after her 2 sets of twins died in a South London house fire in 2021. The children, aged 3 and 4, were home when the ground floor of the house became engulfed in flames. They were treated at the scene before being taken to 2 South London hospitals where they were pronounced dead. Police say 29-year-old Deveka Rose is also charged with the child abandonment and is expected to appear at Croydon Magistrates Court tomorrow. The Mayor of London says the Met Police is chronically underfunded. In a letter to the Home Secretary, Sadiq Khan says London faces unique pressures as a capital city and urges the Home Office to boost the force's finances. He says the underfunding is highlighted by the challenge of policing the protests over the conflict in Gaza and Israel. Mr. Khan warns the funding gap could now be as high as £240 million. Baroness Michelle Mone says she made an error in publicly denying her links to the PPE firm MedPro. It was awarded government contracts worth more than £200 million to supply personal protective equipment after she recommended it to ministers. The National Crime Agency is investigating the firm and its connection to the Conservative peer. Lady Mone argues she is being used as a scapegoat by the government for its own COVID failings. A judge has ordered the BBC to release emails related to Martin Bashir's controversial 1995 interview with Princess Diana. A warning, the following video has flashing images. Mr. Bashir officially stepped down from his job at the broadcaster in 2021 after it emerged he had secured the interview through deception and faking documents. Judge Brian Kennedy said the corporation had been inconsistent and unreliable in the way it dealt with the initial inquest to release material under the Freedom of Information Act. The material related to how the broadcaster handled the scandal when it came to light in 2020. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Sophia. Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, I'm Nana Akua. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. I don't wish to be churlish, but I'm going to be. ITV must be spitting feathers that GB News' Nigel Farage is in the final 3 of I'm a Celebrity. You see, when the show started a few weeks ago and they offered Nigel what was widely rumoured as £1.5 million, I genuinely believe that they thought that it would be a bad move for him. And I say this because of the political snipes by Anton Deck early on in the show about being on the right and the general insults directed at GB News disguised as humour, our apparent 3 viewers, Keith, Linda and the dog, which we took with good humour because every time they mentioned us, it was free advertising that many in the commercial breaks would have killed for. The thing is, many who had a negative opinion of Nigel had never met him. In fact, I suspect most got their view of him, like Nella Rose, from the internet.
Okay, so that since we're going to get everything out in the open, let's get everything out in the open. Right, so sorry, all the tea is coming out now. So basically...
But this is what I was saying to you.
Apparently you're anti-immigrants.
Who told you that?
Oh, the internet.
Well, there we are, then. It must be true. It must be true.
It must be.
It must be true.
OK, but then why don't black people like you?
You'd be amazed they do.
Well,
You'd be amazed.
Nigel!
If you came with me...
Nigel!
If you came with me... If you came with me through South London, you'd be astonished.
Oh, wow. What were you doing in South London, Nigel?
Well, I'm there every day.
You're in South. Wait, sorry, I'm so sorry to be shouting. What are you doing? Sorry.
He's from South London.
I travel through South London.
So everyone hates you for no reason. Well, not that everyone hates you. That was so bad. But like, sorry,
you can disagree with somebody, but to chuck around accusations the way that they've been chucked around is grossly unfair. Anti-immigrant, right? No. All I've said is we cannot go on with the numbers coming to Britain that are coming. Do you know why?
I'm one of the numbers.
Oh, right. So that's it then. So should it be 5 million a year, 10 million?
Question,
No,
right?
you don't seem to understand.
Nigel, hang on.
Those immigrants that are coming in.
And hang on.
Had you have been in power a bit later...
so long about immigrants?
Yes, well, when she was booted out from the jungle very early on after demonstrating an astonishing level of intolerance, all she could say was that she liked Nigel, but she didn't like his views. She called it a sticky one. Anton Deck brought up the topic of cultural appropriation which is when it all went wrong for them. But perhaps she should take a look at her hosts. I mean, they're no stranger to cultural appropriation. Nella said you can't use someone's culture as a fancy dress. Really? Well, here they are, your friendly hosts on TV, dressed as Mexicans. But it's OK, because it's Anton Deck. Or maybe just Deck. OK, well, here are your friendly hosts undercover on TV in blackface in 2003. They apologised, of course, after the backlash, but pot, kettle. Nigel, like most of us, are all walking on eggshells, scared to offend people like you. Nigel speaks for many of us who are confused as to what we can and can't say to this wallflower generation captured by the ideology of woke. A sticky one, you call it. Well, maybe look it up and look up your hosts on the internet. There was that snipe directed at Nigel from Nicey Lorraine Kelly about getting the face you deserve.
What, 59? He's got plenty of years ahead of him. Maybe he wants to get going again.
Is he only 59? I thought he was a hell of a lot older than that. That's astonishing. Just shows you get the face you deserve, frankly.
May I suggest she looks in the mirror? And not to the newspaper rag. They couldn't help themselves either. It even appeared that Nigel was being edited out of the shows, as there were only glimpses of him at the start. But Nigel just carried on being Nigel, smashing all the tasks, and was generally gutted if he was unable to bring back stars for the team. Unfortunately, for those that wanted to see the fall of Nigel Farage, I'm a Celebrity has enabled the public to see the man that those who work with him and have actually met him see. A consummate professional and an intelligent gentleman. So tonight is the final. I urge you to vote for Nigel and crown him king of the jungle, if only to see the look on Anton Deck's faces. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Rwanda a gimmick? After the Tory Star Chamber rejects Sunak's Rwanda flights plan as not watertight, is the scheme doomed? Then stay tuned at 4:50, it's World View. We'll cross live to Los Angeles with Paul Dudridge and get the latest from Trump's domination of the Republican primary. And we'll get the latest from Israel as well, as Biden calls for the two-state solution. At 5, it's my outside guest. My mystery guest will be revealing all about the life behind bars and how 15 years of prison made him reform to become an ambassador for peace. But who is he? A giant question mark. That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything that we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's welcome my panel again. Let's get started. Joining me, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Right, so I'm going to start with you, Danny, because you said you always watch I'm a Celebrity.
I do. I've definitely watched every episode this year because our Nigel's in, and I find it hilarious that so many people who have pathological, almost an illness, with Nigel Farage and how they feel about him, they are imploding. They are going to have some sort of psychological breakdown if he's going to win. In fact, I think they're already having the breakdowns, the mental breakdowns, because he's in the final 3. I don't understand the rules with this cultural appropriation, and you're right to highlight the double standards of Ant and Dec as well. For example, Fred Siriax, who's a Frenchman, everyone was taking the mickey out of his accent. Now, as soon as someone goes, water, or whatever it was, in this sort of southeast London, patois-type West Indian mix of English, and I think it's a very ugly voice and a very ugly accent that combination brings. But it's OK for...
Well, people might say that about your accent.
Well, they may do. They may, for example, I think Josie's Bristolian accent, I think that's ugly as well. So I'm not just picking on someone because of the colour of their skin. I'm just picking on the sounds that come out of that woman's mouth. So it's OK for people to do the French voice, but you can't do the patois West Indian voice. Why? The double standards
Well,
of it.
that's what Nigel was saying, that if he said water, then he wouldn't be able to do that because... And she said, why not? It's a song. So even her argument was hypocrisy there. It was really confusing.
It is confusing.
She's confused.
But may I say, I don't want him to win. And I love GB News, and I think Nigel's a great guy. I want Tony Bellew to win because I'm a massive fan of his. He's an Everton fan like me. He's a Scouser. And I think his true personality is coming out. He just seems a lovely guy. But I don't think either of them are going to win. I think that Sam lad's going to win, unfortunately.
Not Sam. Christine Hamilton.
I don't think you're allowed to work on GB News unless you're supporting
Let's get rid of him.
So it's been nice to know you, Danny. I must say, this is amazing how quickly you forget. Until I saw those clips, I'd completely forgotten about Nella Rose and how ignorant she was and how stupid and how unable to argue. And if she's typical of that generation, then, I mean, God
although
help us.
she's not here to defend herself, and, you know, she's young. She's young. I mean, although I would say at 26 I knew I wasn't
She has just had her chance to put her corner. We've just seen it all again, and she didn't do very well. Anyway, moving swiftly on, I think Nigel has played an absolute blinder, and he's knocked spots off ITV. I wore the jacket specially. I'm sure you're 100% right. They did not expect him to do so well. He's been absolutely brilliant. He's just quietly, he hasn't done anything sensational. He's done no big histrionics, nothing like that. He's just got on with the challenges. He's done them all. He's been kind, he's been nice, a little bit obsessive about tidying the camp. But
well, that's him, you know.
That's him, no. Tony Blackburn, I was in the first one. Tony Blackburn won, and one of the things that endeared him to the viewers was logs. He was obsessive about collecting logs.
Be careful, that can go one way or other.
I thought you meant the dunny.
No, for goodness sake.
Not that type of log.
No. So I think he's done, whether he wins or not, to get third, he's done absolutely brilliantly. He's done himself nothing but good. Nobody who disliked him can, you know, if they don't like him a bit now, they never were going to. He hasn't turned anybody off who did like him. And as you say, I mean, ITV laughing all the way, not to the bank, because they've given it all to Nigel.
Well, they thought, because you could hear it in their, you know, mimicking and taking the mickey out of GB News and how there's hardly any viewers and so on and so forth. Well, those few viewers have helped to push Nigel up the top there to be in the final three. And Dec, I didn't really like it. It put me off when they were being...
Well, Anta, do you know, most of it's canned laughter. They're not even jokes. They're so puerile, their remarks.
Oh, behind the cameras. That's stage laughter.
It's stage laughter. Somebody presses a button.
Oh, it's canned. I thought there were real people laughing behind the camera.
They may be,
but you were there. You were in the jungle. Were there people there when you came out?
Oh, well, of course, when you come out, there's cameramen. I think when I did it, we're talking about 22 years ago, there were about 350 crew. Now there'll be way over 1,000, I think.
Really?
An awful lot of people.
Wasn't yours the one with, was it Nigel Benn?
Nigel Benn, that's
oh, my
right.
God, that was so funny.
Right.
There was the race row.
There was the race row, there was the religion row, there was the God row, there was the chicken breast row.
Oh, it's great.
Whether you should chop the chicken breast before... Cooking always features, and it's been great fun to see how cooking is featured in this one.
You're right about him being a consummate gentleman as well.
Oh, he's a gentleman.
And that comes across, I think he comes across incredibly well. Look, I'm a massive fan of his, but he's not the most charismatic individual, in my opinion. This is the last ever appearance on GBNews. But the great thing about this platform is that you allow my opinion, and whether sometimes it's against the company narrative, you still invite me back every week. And he's a great guy, but I don't think he's got the charisma for the neutral, for the impartial viewer to think, do you know what, I think I'll objectively take politics out of it, I'm going to give it to Nigel. I don't think he's got that charisma.
Well, I've always felt two things. One, I want to know whether the green Speedos were good or bad for Nigel in the eyes of the viewers, I wonder. I mean, they were pretty amazing. But it's always the nice ones who win. I wasn't nice enough to win. I came third as well. Tony Blackburn won. He's incredibly nice. You know, the female footballer, what's her name? Jo, you know.
I'm not into women's football. So.
Oh, come on, the lioness, Jill. She was... It's always really nice...
I'm not into women's football.
Did you hear that?
It was so denigrating.
Dismissive.
Sorry,
it was so dismissive. It really was. I'm not into women's football. Well, as if it's something bad.
So it pains me to say it, but I don't think he'll win. I think it'll be...
He's going to win.
That's Sam lad.
Tony or Sam.
No, Sam's too irritating.
He is. It's like an annoying fly,
he's
isn't
he? So irritating. And I love it when Nigel, he was in the place where they go and talk. What's that place called where they go and talk?
The jungle, the Bush Telegraph.
The Bush Telegraph. He was in there and he was saying, oh, I think he said something like, you know, oh, he's lovely, but every now and again I find him just immensely irritating. Well, something like that, he said. But he's right about Sam. I think he speaks for most of us. He would irritate me.
He would irritate the hell out of me. And how Tony puts up with that sort of puppy dog adoration, I don't know.
Oh, no, I think he's on the brink of snapping with him a lot. You can see him sort of having to regain his composure.
Any good, so
Tony Bellew.
If you want him to win, tell him to don't...
Yeah.
But do you know, that's the whole point about the programme. We see about an hour or an hour and a half, but they are together 24/7. And if Sam keeps that up 24/7, I mean, he would have been driving me absolutely round the bend.
Did you see the bit where he tickled Tony's belly? When tickled his tummy, he said, tick, and they went, rock-a-bye, baby, on a tree. I'd be like... Whoa!
Yeah.
But Nigel's done really well to keep his cool with all those people, because they wouldn't have been his natural bosom buddies, a lot of them. Let's not pick out any names.
No.
But he's done very, very well.
And GBNews has played a blinder, I think. And whoever wrote the contract for Nigel Farage, every time he's introduced on the little GBNews, I mean, this station's played a blinder. And also, you've kept your dignity as well. All these little snidey pops all the time, you know.
Dignity in those green Speedos?
Well, maybe not Nigel's dignity, but the station.
I was like, what? Nigel, really?
I know.
It's really bad. But that's Nigel. He's great. And I think a lot of people didn't anticipate that he's a gentleman.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You know, all his crew, people who work with him, everyone says that.
And a team player.
And they've all realised that now. And they now know that slights at Nigel don't work and actually work against what I think they want, which is one of the others to win and not him, which I think is a
Just
bit
one final thing.
10 seconds.
OK, Nigel Farage does look older than 59, and I tell you why.
I don't think he does.
Well, I think he does, because he's spent 40 years smoking. He's got a smoker's face. When you smoke, it prematurely ages your body. So I disagree with Lorraine about the face, because I think he's quite a handsome man. But unfortunately, his face does look older than 59, in my opinion.
But her insult wasn't necessarily
No,
that.
it was completely... It was just snidey.
Can you imagine if a man had said that about a woman? My heavens, they'd have been drummed out of court. She got away with it, of course.
Well, yeah, she's sort of got away with it, but it's pretty distasteful. She should apologise, that's what I think. But what do you think? I reckon she should. Listen, this is GB News 19 after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up on the way, World View will cross live to Los Angeles and also to Israel to get the latest on what's going on there. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is the Rwanda plan a gimmick? I've got a poll up right now on X, Twitter, asking you that very question. Is the Rwanda plan a gimmick? Send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.com and tell me what you think. Cast your vote now.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet?
What is this?
It's
my new
It's
teeth.
your new
Yes, I
teeth.
know.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 24 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. Don't forget you can download the GB News app, or why not stream the show live on YouTube. I'm Nana Akua. And it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is the Rwanda plan a gimmick? With an important vote on Tuesday, Rishi Sunak continues to come under fire after the Prime Minister paid £240 million towards the Rwanda plan without a single asylum seeker yet to be relocated there. Now, ahead of an important vote on Tuesday, murmurs within the Tory party are beginning to grow. GB News has been exclusively told that 4 groups of backbenchers will meet tomorrow to decide whether or not Rwanda will actually work and if they'll back under pressure Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in the vote. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the Rwanda plan a gimmick? Well, joining me now is Conservative peer Lord Moylan, former Chief Immigration Office at the UK Border Force Kevin Saunders, and also former Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker. All right, well, I'm going to start with you. Daniel, what do you think?
The whole purpose of this starts from recognising that the people who are arriving on the French coast and coming over in boats are actually being transported here by very large businesses. These are large corporate entities. They're illegal and they're networks. You can't track down their accounts or look them up like that, but they're very large businesses and they're run to make money out of people who are suffering. And the best way of disrupting this whole process is to stop their business model working. And that's been the thought behind all of this. So it's not a question of saying all of the illegal immigrants have arrived are going to be moved to Rwanda. It's making it the case that if you, as a refugee, are paying thousands of pounds in order to get across the channel and land up in Kent or wherever, you will not be staying here, you will be going somewhere else. So you will think twice before you actually buy that travel agent's, that travel ticket, so to speak, that they are selling you illegally and exploiting you in. And bear in mind, these people are not just paying money, some of them aren't paying money, they're effectively going into bonded labour, they're selling themselves practically into slavery. So it's right, they're not going to be able to stay here, that will disrupt the business model, and that's the plan.
All right, Kevin Saunders.
Hello.
What do you think? Is this whole thing a gimmick, Rwanda? Will it actually ever work?
No, it's not a gimmick, it's a very serious thing. The trouble is, where the government made the mistake was announcing that this was going to happen 2 years ago. Boris announced it at Lid Airport. And we've had, as you said in the beginning, nothing has happened in 2 years. And this is manna from heaven for the people smugglers who are telling the people, look, you've got nothing to worry about. The British government aren't going to do anything. It's all talk, it's all bluster. And that helps the business model. But no, this is not a gimmick. And if we can finally get it through the courts and it happens, it will have a deterrent effect.
Well, because you hear a lot of politicians saying that it's a ludicrous scheme, and I suspect it could potentially work. Norman, what do you think?
Well, I wouldn't call it ludicrous, but what I would say is that those who are concerned about migration ought to be more concerned and are more concerned about the fact that there's 750,000 people coming in net migration legally into this country, and the number who are coming by small boats, which has been given a huge amount of prominence, is actually quite a small proportion of that 750,000. The second thing is that the Prime Minister has completely mishandled this, and he's managed to upset people on both sides of the Conservative Party, those on the right who want to see the European Convention on Human Rights abandoned, and those on the left of the Conservative Party who are horrified by the idea of international law being broken. And we now got to the ludicrous situation where the Prime Minister said he can't go further because Rwanda won't countenance breaking international law, the country that's deemed by the Supreme Court to be unsafe.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're saying that, and we get that, but ultimately, it is a plan, and, you know, as Lord Moylan said, it could work, and, you know, people are taking it seriously. So I'm just wondering whether you think that the plan then is a gimmick, in your view, Norman.
I think he's been a rod for his own back, and I think he's been blown out of proportion in terms of the numbers compared to the issue of legal migration. Rwanda itself is going to take hundreds, not thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, hundreds only of people if this plan actually succeeds. That's, to use that unfortunate phrase, a drop in the ocean.
Daniel, though, you seem to think that's just because it's hundreds, it shouldn't really matter. It would still potentially work.
Well, I think when it comes to a decision whether you're going to spend your life savings on a ticket to take you to England and you think there's a reasonable chance it's actually going to take you to Rwanda, then that has potentially quite a deterrent effect. It doesn't even have to be certain. It just has to be
you know, there's a 1 in 10 chance I could end up in Rwanda. Is that something you're going to spend your money on? I think the difference, I appreciate Norman's point that the numbers are smaller than legal migration, which is a serious issue. And even to go beyond Norman and say that he said 750,000 the year before last. In fact, it was 1.2 million the year before last came in, but of course 600,000 roughly left. So that's where you get the 750 from. That's 1.2 million new people coming from outside this country. And nobody seriously thinks that that can continue. But there is a difference, and that is that those people are coming in legally with our permission, and they're coming in nearly all cases in connection with a job or studies which they are funded for, and they're not falling as a charge immediately on the state. Whereas what British people feel is that there's something unfair and wrong about jumping the queue coming in over small boats, on a small boat over the channel. And it shows that the government has lost control of its borders. The fact that the government hasn't resolved it, despite saying 2 years ago it was going to address it, goes to the question of the competence of the government. And finally, of course, the people who are arriving are an immediate charge on the state, who have to be accommodated and looked after by the state at public expense from day one. So it's a very different thing, I think. It strikes people as a form of cheating rather than anything else. It's not just a numbers business.
Final word to you, Kevin. You've got about 30 seconds.
Yes, I mean, we shouldn't confuse legal migration with illegal migration. I mean, there are lots of arguments with the legal migration. For a start, you've got to take out of the figures Ukraine, Hong Kong and Afghanistan. Then you've got to look at what's left. And in fact, nobody would disagree that we need overseas students because the overseas students contribute so much to the economy. But with the illegal migration, the trouble is with illegal migration, and we've had this since 2000, under both Labour, Conservative and coalitions. The governments keep changing their minds and doing something different. If they actually left it to the professionals to get on with, we could solve this problem almost overnight.
Wow, I bet they'd love that. Crikey, well, I wish you would. Right, well, let's get a final thoughts then. Norman Baker, is this Rwanda plan a gimmick, yes or no?
I wouldn't call it a gimmick, but what I would say is that it's not the right way forward. The one thing the government's done which is sensible is reaching a deal with Albania to try to hive off people coming from Albania. And the reason the small boats numbers have gone down recently is because of that deal with Albania. Cooperation with other European countries is a way to reduce these numbers, not army plans involving Rwanda.
All right, Kevin Saunders, yes or no? Is it a gimmick?
No, it's not a gimmick. It'll work. It will work. But we mustn't confuse this with negotiating with our European friends, because our European friends haven't negotiated with us since 2000. So that's just a no-no.
And finally to you, Daniel, yes or no, gimmick?
Well, we do already cooperate with the French, and it's not doing a great deal. I mean, it is doing something, but it's not doing as much as it needs to do. It's not a gimmick. I think it can be made to work. But the point for the government now is they've got to make it work, and they haven't got much time.
Well, they've got to make it work, otherwise they're toast. Kevin Saunders, thank you very much, Chief Immigration Officer for UK Border Force Law. Daniel Moylan, Conservative peer. Also Norman Baker, former Lib Dem Minister. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Well, what do you think at home? You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is the Rwanda plan a gimmick? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Danny Kelly and Christine Hamilton. And still to come, don't forget this week's Outside. My mystery guest speaks about his transformation after 15 years behind bars. Who do you think he is? But first, let's get your latest news with Sophia.
Thank you, Nana. It's 4:33. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Some breaking news. Met Police say 2 teenage girls have been arrested on suspicion of robbery after a woman was attacked in London. A warning, this video shows distressing images. Footage of the attack has been circulating on social media, showing the 20-year-old walking in Stamford Hill and then being robbed and beaten. The woman, who is from an Orthodox Jewish community, was reportedly left bruised but did not need to go to hospital. Met Police say it's keeping an open mind about the motive for the attack but are treating it as a possible hate crime. GB News understands tomorrow Tory MPs will give their verdict on whether the Rwanda bill is workable. Conservative MP Sybil Cash will present the findings ahead of the Crunch second vote on Tuesday. The Prime Minister has come under pressure after it was discovered he paid £240 million towards a Rwanda plan without a single flight taking off. Tory sources say the MPs will decide whether to support the legislation tomorrow or, if necessary, hold a second meeting ahead of the vote that evening. The Labour leader will warn the Tories can no longer govern the country because warring camps are, as he describes, fighting like rats in a sack. In a speech on the same day as the scheduled vote on the government's Rwanda policy, he'll claim it's Labour that shares Britain's values. Despite the pressures of over £240 million policy that's been marred by legal challenges, the Prime Minister called on Labour to back his emergency legislation. Baroness Michelle Mone says she made an error in publicly denying her links to the PPE firm MedPro. It was awarded government contracts worth more than £200 million to supply personal protective equipment after she recommended it to ministers. The National Crime Agency is investigating the firm and its connection to the Conservative peer. Lady Mone argues she is being used as a scapegoat by the government for its own COVID failings. McDonald's has apologised after footage posted on social media showed a security guard mopping the floor where a homeless man was sitting. The video was taken on Victoria Street in London last night and shows the man trying to move his sleeping bag and duvet away from the water as it seeped underneath. In the video, he says, "Leave me alone," before one security guard kicks a blanket out of the way and splashes more water along the pavement. McDonald's said it was shocked and saddened by the footage. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Sophia. 36 after 4. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, it's World View. We'll cross live to Los Angeles and get the latest from Paul Dudridge, host of the Politics People podcast. But next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is the Rwanda plan a gimmick? I've got a poll up right now on X, Twitter, asking you that very question. Is the Rwanda plan a gimmick? Send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 40 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome on board. If you've just tuned in, where the hell have you been? Well, it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is the Rwanda plan a gimmick? With an important vote on Tuesday, Rishi Sunak continues to come under fire after the Prime Minister paid £240 million towards the Rwanda plan, without a single asylum seeker yet to be relocated there. So murmurs within the Tory party are growing, with 4 groups of backbenchers meeting tomorrow to decide if it's actually workable and whether or not they'll back the Prime Minister. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the Rwanda plan a gimmick? Let's see what my panel will make of that. I'm joined by author and broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Christine, I've got to start with you. The Rwanda plan, in your view, do you think it's a gimmick?
No. To answer the direct question, no, it's not a gimmick. I think, in theory, it could and it should work. If they'd managed to get it off the ground however many years ago it was first talked about, then I think it could have been successful. So far, they've managed to send at least 2, is it not, or 3 Home Secretaries to Rwanda, but not a single immigrant. So, no, it's not a gimmick, but it hasn't got a hope in hell of becoming law. It will never. Look at the Commons. The Commons, the Tory party, is literally riven asunder in so many ways, but in particular by this. It won't get through the Commons. If it did miraculously get through the Commons, it wouldn't get through the Lords. They are running out of time. They've got, what's the date today? They've got just over I think they've got a year and a week or something before they would have to call an election at the latest. So realistically, they've got way under a year before there's an election. There simply isn't time. Not a single person will be on a plane to Rwanda, except possibly another Home Secretary. So it is completely and utterly doomed because the Tory party haven't got their act together soon enough. But no, it's not a gimmick. But in theory, it should work.
But it sounds like a gimmick if they don't even want to go for it themselves. Danny?
I disagree. I think it's the definition of a gimmick. A gimmick is an idea designed to attract attention. And this is an idea designed to attract attention. It's designed to attract the attention of the immigrants, of the financial, what are they called? Not the illegal immigrants, the economic migrants, forgive me. OK, and there's a difference in opinion about what defines them. But I think a gimmick is something designed to attract attention, and that's what it's got. Now, separately, whether the plane's going to take off is something else that we can discuss. And I agree, I don't think the planes are going to take off. I think the planes need to take off. There was a fabulous piece of journalism by Mark White, GB News' foreign affairs guy, who's
Homeland Security editor.
Homeland Security. He's a real credit to this station. He really is. And he went to the other side of the channel and he interviewed, like, I think either people smugglers or he interviewed economic migrants, stroke illegals, whatever you want to call them. And he said that they're laughing. They're openly laughing at the British government. It was a fabulous piece of original investigative journalism. So I think people on the other side of the channel, I think they think of it as a gimmick, but the light-hearted definition of it, it's just a gimmick. It's never going to work.
I think they think it's a joke. I mean, let's not dance around on the definition of gimmick. I think they think it's a joke, the Rwanda plan. It's a joke. But I mean, it could have worked. It's a perfectly feasible plan. It could have worked if it had been executed more quickly and properly, but it's absolutely had it now.
I don't think the pace of it is the issue here, because if you think about it, the internal challenges and struggles are coming from within the same party. And then also you've got the legal profession as well, who are, I mean, the Daily
waiting to pounce.
Well, the Daily Mail did a fantastic expose. I mean, that was incredible, where they uncovered the whole business with a lot of lawyers who are actually just taking advantage of the system. So you've got that to deal with. So the whole thing is an industry of people who want to perpetuate this system. And any little challenge or gap, and I think this is where Robert Jenerick and Suella Braverman were absolutely on the money. If you don't close those loopholes, it's a gimmick, because nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's become a gimmick, but I don't think the actual idea to start with was a gimmick. We're dancing on a pin, aren't we?
Well, the question is it a gimmick? And I'm just using the definition of what a gimmick is. I'll tell you what was great in PMQs on Wednesday. Rishi Sunak having a pop at Sir Keir Starmer. Sir Keir Starmer is an Arsenal fan, and they are sponsored by the Rwandan government. Visit Rwanda on their left arm.
Oh, no, really?
Yes, it's so embarrassing. It's humiliating. He's saying it's an unsafe country, that they're going to be sent back to places of potential torture. Yet Arsenal Football Club are sponsored by Visit Rwanda, by the Rwanda Tourist Board.
Keir Starmer's club, is it?
Keir Starmer supports Arsenal Football Club. Rishi Sunak put him back in his box.
Well, you see, the thing is, though, I find it quite... When people say, oh, but it's got a history of genocide and all this, I think to myself, well, hold on a minute. How soon were we trading with Germany and other countries who've had histories? How soon were we trading with them? So what is actually behind this? And I think there is an element of racism in there, I have to say.
Very much so.
So much so because they're black people, so it's in an African country. Oh, they're not as civilised as us, and all their genocides will be different to our ones. We'll accept the one that happened with the in Germany, and we're happy to do business with them only a few years later. But we're talking about Rwanda, and they're saying, oh, many years ago they had a genocide. And it's like, well, they're not doing it now. So you have to... You have to carry on with life.
I think too many people, when they think of Rwanda, they think of... Do you remember that film, Hotel Rwanda, which was all about the genocide?
I didn't see the film, but I've heard
it was horrific. And I think people think, gosh, Rwanda, and that's what they have in their minds. Rwanda has changed out of all recognition since then, and I don't see any problem with sending people...
And just finally, just closer to home, Northern Ireland, Good Friday Agreement. Prior to that, buildings were being blown up, soldiers were being assassinated, open warfare, armed personnel carriers, little mini tanks rolling on the streets of Belfast.
It's just an excuse to kind of, as if it's a point to say, they're not as civilised.
Because they're black.
And I think
you're
that's
absolutely right.
I think you're right.
As a black person, think that. And Rwanda is actually the jewel in Africa's crown. That's what they call it. But listen, the show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Where should we go to now? Oh, let's go to...
Miranda.
Should we go to Northamptonshire? Should we speak to Miranda? Miranda Richardson. Not the Miranda Richardson. For GBNews is Miranda Richardson.
Our Miranda Richardson.
Miranda Richardson. What do you think of it?
Afternoon, everybody. How are we today?
Fine, thank you. You look fabulous, by the way. What's your view on this?
Thank you very much. Do you know what? I think it's right with what everybody said, that actually what started out could have been something really positive has kind of snowballed into something where everybody has kind of jumped in, had their little go on the bandwagon, and that unfortunately has made it, you know, like Danny says, look like that gimmick, if you're going to use that phrase. And I think, you know, the premise was a great idea, but in how they've run with it, as it quite often happens, it just doesn't, you know, gather any speed. It just goes off in 100 different directions, with everybody wanting a piece of the pie and actually missing the aspect that we're all concerned about in the first place. And I think that's what's made it, you know, look like this, you know, vision of that they don't need it. And like I say, you know, we have to say it's that racist aspect that, oh, well, you know, we don't need to help them for one reason or another. And it's such a shame because, you know, if we'd have got it right and we'd dealt with it right, it could have been a very different story.
They need to start just getting on with actually putting policy through instead of arguing with each other and then playing politics and trying to be, I'll be the one that leads the ship now. I mean, they are one party. We vote for a party, not an individual. So she should get on with it. Miranda Richardson, thank you so much. She's a great British woman in Northamptonshire. She looks fabulous, doesn't she? Miranda, lovely to speak to you. So what do you think then? Your thoughts on this one? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. I'll read some of those in just a moment. But if you've just tuned in, it's coming up to 49 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up now, my outside guest. He's an amazing person right now. Let me give you some clues, and you've got to work out who he is. Now, he tells of his journey from one of Britain's most wanted gang members, yes, to having spent jail time with some of the UK's most prolific criminals, including Charles Bronson. You can just see a peek of his curly hair behind the question mark. Who do you think it is? Send me your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, let's get an update with your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glazier. Low pressure still very much in charge of our weather over the next couple of days, bringing us some unsettled conditions and some wet and windy weather on the way. Storm Fergus, named by Met Erin, slowly continues to move its way towards the UK through the rest of Sunday and into Monday. This will bring rain spreading its way across parts of Scotland, and this rain already falling on some very saturated ground, with further rain pushing across northern parts of England through the early hours of Monday morning. Some very strong winds too, particularly across western parts of Wales and through the Bristol Channel, where we could see those gusts up to 60 miles an hour. Temperatures across the south around 7 or 8 degrees, but across parts of Scotland we could see down to -1 or -2, with some icy stretches, particularly for southwest Scotland through the early hours of Monday morning. Elsewhere though, Monday generally starts a drier and brighter day for most of us. Plenty of sunshine as we head through the afternoon. Perhaps a few showers skirting in across northern parts of England and eastern Scotland as well, seeing those showers continue to push in from the coast. But with those lighter winds and with some sunshine perhaps feeling a little more pleasant than recent days, around 12 degrees in the south and generally around average further north. Tuesday starts a cloudy and wet picture again as rain continues to push northwards into parts of Scotland, again already falling on that very saturated ground. So some localised flooding here. That sets us up for further rain through the rest of Tuesday and into Wednesday, but perhaps hints of something a little more settled on the way through the latter half of next week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome. If you've just tuned in, it's just coming up to 5 minutes to 5 o'clock. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. And it's time now for World View. Let's travel over to America and speak to the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Duddridge, and get the latest on what's going on in the world of Trump. Paul, good to talk to you. So, lots of things happening. Donald Trump, he's leading the opposition. What's going on?
He's leading in all polls. And I know that this gets said all the time, and you should listen to polls, you shouldn't listen to polls. But what's significant, he's leading in polls that at this stage in 2016, when obviously he went on to a glorious victory, he is leading in polls that he wasn't leading. He's now 60% support, for example, with the Republican Party. He was at like 35% support at this stage with the Republican Party. In 2015 leading on to 2016. So he is way ahead. Even CNN are now reporting that he is in a stronger position now than he was when he went on to win in 2016. So his opposition, these four other candidates that are seeking to be the candidate for the Republican Party, the nominee for the Republican Party, they're polling at like 15%. Nikki Haley now has gone into the lead of the four the four trailing him. She's at 15%, and they get excited about that. He's at 59, 60%. So everybody, even the left-wing establishment, is acknowledging that he is leading by all metrics, and now leading against Biden 4 points. Again, for the very first time, serious pollsters and journalists and publications are acknowledging that he is leading Biden, and they've been very reluctant to do so. They've been very reluctant to do that.
His hair, though, has taken on another whole new look. Wow, his hair looks... It's hilarious. What's going on with it? It looks like the top of a car. Now, you mentioned Biden. What about Hunter? Doesn't it sort of like ring up like that? Like, it looks like he's left the curl.
I can't have a go at people's hair. Look at me. What's this?
Actually,
anyway.
To be honest, this isn't even real. Well, it is. I paid for it, but it's not actually... You know, it's sitting on my head. What about Hunter Biden, then? Because Hunter has been hit with criminal tax charges. At last, something's happened to him, that he's actually got in trouble for some of the things he's been doing.
At last, exactly, yes. Some of the partying that we've seen from the Hunter Biden laptop is finally coming home to roost. People are, the tax officials are actually looking at the spending that he's obviously spent on having quite a jolly time by the look of it, and saying, well, where did this money come from? You haven't paid tax on it. And so that's turning into a criminal tax avoidance case, and it's very, very serious. Hunter Biden's attorneys are on TV this week saying, this is unfair. Nobody else would be treated like this. Nobody else would be treated so unfairly. And it's like, Trump's in court again. It's like, this is just political. Do you think? Yes, the whole of the judiciary has been turned political. So Hunter Biden now now this is great and jolly. However, it is serious for Joe Biden, because the tax avoidance criminal charges begin unraveling and maybe perhaps shining light on business connections between Hunter and Joe. It's more and more looking forward to 2024 is looking more and more likely that Joe Biden is going to be brought down by his own side, by his own judiciary, before we even get to the election. I think that we are beginning to see the end of the Biden administration and the parachute candidate being brought in ready for the next election, because this Hunter Biden case will... Anyway, it depends which side you take, but it is going to start exposing connections between Hunter and Joe.
It does feel like that his number's coming up now, Joe Biden. And very briefly, you've got about 30 seconds on this. There's criminal charges threatened in Texas for an abortion case. What's that about?
Look, you and I were the only ones talking in the midterm elections. There was going to be a red wave. Trump was going to beat all. And we said it's absolutely not going to happen because of the Roe v. Wade abortion. They've now done a criminal case in Texas, some poor woman, and she's had to go to court. It is such a bad look. I think that this is the thing that defines the 24 election. I think it makes it very, very difficult for Trump to win because you've got Republicans criminalizing abortion, and there's a case in Texas right now, and the Attorney General saying that he will prosecute doctors who perform late-term abortions. I think it's really difficult for the Republicans to wear this.
Well, listen, Paul Duddridge, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Paul Duddridge, host of the Politics People podcast. That was World View. Now, some of you have been getting in touch. I'll read some of your messages on Nigel Farage potentially joining Conservative Party. Steve says Nigel Farage jumping ship would be the worst move he could make, and also those who are presently politically homeless feel more isolated than ever. Well, listen, keep all your thoughts coming. You're watching and listening to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Lots more still to come in the next hour.
This is Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. GB News understands tomorrow Tory MPs will give their verdict on whether the Rwanda bill is lawful. Conservative MP Sybil Cash will present the findings ahead of the crunch second vote on Tuesday. The Prime Minister has come under pressure after it was discovered he paid £240 million towards the Rwanda plan without a single flight taking off. Tory sources say the MPs will decide whether to support the legislation tomorrow or, if necessary, hold a second meeting ahead of the vote. Israeli tanks are battling to reach Gaza's main southern city after ordering civilians to evacuate. Khan Yunis was hit by heavy bombardment through the night as the Israel Defense Force advanced. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says international calls to end the war are inconsistent. Briefing his cabinet, Netanyahu told the leaders of France, Germany and other countries you cannot, on the one hand, support the elimination of Hamas and, on the other, pressure us to end the war, which would stop the elimination of the terror group. Met Police say 2 teenage girls have been arrested on suspicion of robbery after a woman was attacked in London. A warning, this video shows distressing images. Footage of the attack has been circulating on social media, showing the 20-year-old walking in Stamford Hill and then being robbed and beaten. The woman, who is from the Orthodox Jewish community, was reportedly left bruised but did not need to go to hospital. Met Police say it's keeping an open mind about the motive for the attack and are treating it as a possible hate crime. A mother has been charged with manslaughter after her 2 sets of twins died in a South London house fire in 2021. The children, aged 3 and 4, were home when the ground floor of the house became engulfed in flames. They were treated at the scene before being taken to 2 South London hospitals where they were pronounced dead. Police say 29-year-old Deveka Rose is also charged with child abandonment and is expected to appear at Croydon Magistrates Court tomorrow. The Mayor of London says the Met Police is chronically underfunded. In a letter to the Home Secretary, Sadiq Khan says London faces unique pressures as the capital city and urges the Home Office to boost the force's finances. He says the underfunding is highlighted by the challenge of policing the protests over the conflict in Gaza and Israel. Mr Khan warns the funding gap could now be as high as £240 million. Baroness Michelle Mone says she made an error in publicly denying her links to the PPE firm MedPro. It was awarded government contracts worth more than £200 million to supply personal protective equipment after she recommended it to ministers. The National Crime Agency is investigating the firm and its connection to the Conservative peer. Lady Moan argues she is being used as a scapegoat by the government for its own COVID failings. A judge has ordered the BBC to release emails related to Martin Bashir's controversial 1995 interview with Princess Diana. A warning, the following video has some flashing images. Mr Bashir officially stepped down from his job at the broadcaster in 2021 after it emerged he had secured the interview through deception and faking documents. Judge Brian Kennedy said the corporation had been inconsistent and unreliable in the way it dealt with the initial request to release material under the Freedom of Information Act. The material related to how the broadcaster handled the scandal when it came to light in 2020. Fresh weather warnings have been issued as Storm Fergus sweeps across the country. Yellow weather warnings and over 40 flood warnings have been issued across England and Scotland. Gale force winds are likely to hit South Wales and areas around the Bristol Channel. Homes and cars in Leitrim village in Ireland were seriously damaged after a possible tornado hit the area. Emergency services were called after high winds from Storm Met Erin flattened trees, ripped off rooftops and buildings and left debris scattered on a street. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Sophia. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, also broadcaster and author Christina Hamilton. Still to come each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on The Outside. And today, my guest tells his story from Britain's most wanted gang member to meeting Charles Bronson while sentenced to 15 years imprisonment, to an advocate for better lives as an ambassador for peace with his own autobiography. But who on earth could those curls belong to behind the question mark? Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the online GP appointment booking system fit for purpose? As thousands struggle to get appointments, is the NHS's technology failing us all, in particular those who are of the older generation? And as ever, you can get in touch. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. So it's fast approaching 7 minutes after 5 o'clock, and as ever each Sunday, just after 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP or someone who's had an extremely interesting career. We take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on The Outside. And today, my special guest's life story is nothing short of extraordinary. From one of the UK's most wanted London gang members to spending 15 years as a Category A prisoner. He's walked through the darkest corridors of life, but today he's a successful CEO, author and TV personality. Now he's shared his tale in a tell-all book, From Demons of Childhood to the Shadows of Crime. His autobiography unveils the journey inside some of the UK's darkest and most dangerous prisons. I would say what it was called, but then I would give you his name. It was released in 2003, and my guest is not just turning a new leaf, but helping others avoid the path that he once walked. Can you guess? Any ideas? Well, I'm pleased to say I'm joined by ex-gangster turned CEO, Stephen Gillan. Stephen, welcome.
Hi, Nana, how you doing? I'm loving the question mark.
Do you like the question mark?
I have to say, yeah.
Just a little curls to give away a tiny clue. Who is it? It's Stephen Gillan. Stephen, talk to me about your life then. What was it like growing up, and what kind of background did you have? What did your parents do?
Yeah, there's no excuses, of course, Nana. But the fact is, some of us are positioned for tough starts. You know, mine was like that. I was actually born here. I was taken over to Belfast, you know, as a small baby, 6 months old, This was in the early 70s when, you know, the war was over there. There was some bad times over there for everyone. And I stayed there until I was 9. So that was the start for me.
So you stayed there till it was 9. So you would presumably been there around the Troubles and everything.
Yeah.
And then, so what happened then? After 9 years old, where did you go and what transpired?
Well, I see, you know, horrendous things, you know, that human beings do to each other in the middle of that over there in Ireland, right? You know, so I was already conditioned in a way. Although behind the door, my family was very religious. They was very kind, so I had a good foundation there. But of course, outside was chaos. My surrogate mother died of cancer, when I was age 9, so it was deemed I must go back to England, so I was the little child.
So when you say surrogate mother, she carried you, but she wasn't your mother?
Well, I was left. My mother left me in Ireland when I was a child to come back to England to try and make a better life for us, but, you know, I didn't see her for all them years, so my surrogate mother was really my aunt.
No, your aunt, OK. And so she died, then did you go back to your mother?
She died of cancer, so, you know, I was a young child on the boat, you know, with nothing, going over to this alien place, this alien people, and I was with her at the start for a little bit, but I ended up in foster homes and children's homes, you know, a succession of bad places after that. So it kind of went downhill, really, when I come back very, very quickly.
Oh, no. So when did you find yourself sort of in a life of crime, and how did that transpire?
I think the conditioning is very important, as we know, you know, and you know, the environment, it definitely triggers this. I mean, we've got a lot of science behind this nowadays that explains this. So we have to be accountable, but there are explanations here of the roadmap of why it was so conducive, you know, for me, and I was so open to be groomed into that kind of a life. Yeah. I was your feral little kid on the street, really, in the East End, right? That's the bottom line. You know what they call you,
a little young man.
Yeah, but survival is the thing here. You know, you have to say it as it is, and you know what you do. You know, you're by yourself. You're carrying a lot of trauma. You don't have the right guidance, the right instruction. You haven't got that right comfort around you, and all that. You're an accident waiting to happen in many ways, and of course that did. You know, very quickly.
So you stumbled into what then, and kind of at what age were you when you sort of stumbled into a life of crime?
Well, I was very young, Nana. You know, it started early because there was a lot of brutality in some of the homes that I was in.
Okay.
So, you know, I was trying to protect some of the younger ones in there, but I myself was only a tiny kid. You know, it's quite brutal, to be honest. They should do all manner of things in there, so there was more violence, and you know, so we used to run away and all this stuff, and we'd do stuff, and that was the start of it. It was petty crime, then which went on to serious organised crime very, very quickly.
How did you get into organised crime, and what sort of things? You found yourself in a gang, and you know, how old were you, and you know, did you have an initiation process? What did you have to do to get into that gang?
Well, it starts early. It's a little bit more than that, you know, because of course we're looking for a family. We're looking to belong, right?
Yeah,
you know, and you're really open to that process because you know, we're your family. We've always got your back and all this stuff. And of course, this is what you're screaming for as a young child: that protection, that belonging, that, you know, being part of something. So it was really young, from 13, 14. I mean, you know, the truth of it, as dark as it is, you know, there was firearms and all this stuff around us by the age of 15, 16, and I was, you know, around some of the real, unfortunately, some of the real hardcore people was the only kind of role models I kind of had back then. And
you were first imprisoned when you were 14 for a few months. What did you do?
This was a fight, and it was a gang fight, you know, and someone got hurt in there. It was GBH.
Really?
Yeah.
That's terrible.
It is.
And how is the victim okay?
Yeah, the victim's okay. This was the life that we was involved in. I mean, there's no excuses here. I'm not the excuses guy,
no,
you know, and you have to be accountable. But you know, the way to change this, like I do now, and get the messaging across, Nana, is say how it was, but you know, how people need to be, because this is not a glamorized life. There's no good endings in this. You know, I have to just say that.
So you spent then in 1991 till you were 22. Is that right? You were in prison for 17 years. What did you do to wind up in prison for that?
It was armed robbery. I mean, the truth of it was, I was in that life. I had been positioned in that life. Of course, I had the choices. I didn't know anything else. I was very engineered to be that person that I was at that time, and. It's very, they lock you in. But, the other thing as well, I have to say, is some of the people in that life, do they have good parts of themselves? Are they talented?
Well,
of course they are.
Of course they are.
They could have been anything else.
But
it
what
just
did
so
you
happened.
rob? What was it that you robbed, and what, It must have been bad for you to spend so much time in there.
Yeah, it was armed robbery, and the flying squad was involved, and there was an operation over a couple of years, so there was all this kind of things, and there was shots fired, unfortunately, on that robbery where I was finally arrested. It was a ready eye, they call it, which is like a police ambush, Nana, and that was the end of that, and I went to the Old Bailey there, and that was the start of it.
What were you thinking then as they were sentencing you? I mean, and obviously, what's it like in your head being caught doing something that you know you shouldn't be doing, and then the thoughts that are going through your mind when you're then sentenced?
The truth was, Nana, when I look back at the person I had become then, I was something I was never meant to be, and that darkness had really come in. I had ran with that, but, there's a lot of trauma, a lot of different stuff in there. So, you're not in a good place, obviously. But when I stood in the Bailey that time, it was really strange. It's like serendipity in a bad way. I kind of knew that I was always going to get that, which, of course, is bizarre, right?
Yeah, so you went down for 17 years. Did you serve all of that 17 years, or did they let you out early?
I'd done 11 years and 9 months as a Category A, which is quite rare. It's quite rare, because you're meant to come down, say, from A, B, C, D being open prison. So I didn't get any of that.
And then from there on, did you go back into prison, or was it at that point that you turned your life around and started doing things to help others?
What happened is I come out, I was institutionalised, I was still carrying a lot of trauma. And, I went back to the street, as it were, in the East End, and, I still wasn't in a good place, of all the stuff I'd been through in that sentence. If you think of 12 years, really even coping with normal society, I just wasn't there, Nana, right? There was a lot of stuff going on. I was arrested again with a firearm, which I had for protection because of all the stuff that was going on. So I was pulled back into it. So I went to prison, for 5 years for that, for possession. I had done half of that. But when I come out after that, I'd seen through that life for a long time, Nana, and I'd wanted out.
What was it that specifically made you? So you did this second prison term, you served half of it, but there must have been a moment then that you thought, all right, that's it, I'm done with this. Was there anything in specific you could put your finger on?
There were many moments, through that, right, and I knew, and it was wrong, and you see through that, and but for me, internally, I got to the point I couldn't hurt people no more. I couldn't hurt the people I loved, or anyone else for that matter. I just couldn't be the way, that I was, the way I felt, about myself. Or even people looking down at me, like, when I knew I was worth much more, right?
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
So what was the first start of you sort of turning things around? What was the first thing that you did?
Well, I remember a guy, and at the start of this, and I never forget him, he said to me, Stephen, you only need to change one thing. I said, what's that? He said, everything. It was so true, right? Yeah, I had the intellectual understanding of that, of course, but, the penny dropping, for us as human beings is a different thing. So I'd done a lot of voluntary work, I helped a lot of the homeless. I used to wash the floors, make the beds, do the tea. I loved that. I had to get my humanity back. I went to university, I passed with honours. I got a business degree.
Well done.
I was kind of lucky in a way because my family had a building business at the time. But, I didn't get any favours. I mean, I got it worse, right? So I started at the bottom. I had to work my way, all the way through. But within 18 months, I'd, worked my way all the way through that and started my own first business. So that's the middle bit.
And what was your first business in?
My family used to do groundwork, so it was building roads, basically, really, really hard stuff out in all weathers. That's where we started. But my first company was a refurbishment business. I wanted to go inside, so Yeah.
Don't blame you. I've been wanting to work indoors as well. I mean, I'm not doing any more roads. Roads where we're going, we don't need any roads. Name the film.
Huh?
Roads where we're going, we don't need roads.
You don't need roads.
What film is that?
I don't know. Which one?
DeLorean. Back to the Future, when it takes off. And
Back
says
to
that
the
at the end.
Future.
I love that film. I love all this.
Such an old one.
It's such a good one, though, isn't it? They don't make them like that anymore. So now you're reformed, you've turned your life around, you've got businesses. Are you a millionaire? Are you rich?
I still have to work very hard, Nana. You know, like
You
everyone
are.
else, to maintain what we have.
Yeah.
Look, I'm a very grateful person. I'm a very boots on the ground person. Life has really given me a real depth. So I keep at it. You know, and I'm just very privileged for everything that comes. I embrace it all.
Yeah, and your mission again, is it to help others as well, to sway them away from the past? Because I know you talk about that a lot.
It's definitely that. I mean, I do tours, public speaking tours. You know, I've do a lot of work now. I won't mention who it is, but it's a major broadcaster. So, you know, I do TV series. You can
tell us.
Well, I do a lot of work with Sky, right? You know,
perhaps not them, but
No, well, you know, it is what it is.
No, that's great. That's great.
You know, I mean, I'm in the middle of I just done some work with Ross Kemp. You know, an amazing guy, really professional, who's translating the dark corners, as it were, right, as we do as well. So I've just signed a 2-book deal as well. My next book, which was the first book, is actually called Extraordinary. Stephen Gillan, The Search for a Life Worth Living. You know, and you said extraordinary earlier, but this is coming out early next year at the start of the year. You know, there's a film behind that, and you know, stuff like that. Wow. So it's amazing. I'm very grateful for all this stuff.
Finally, I always wonder whether your reality has sort of exceeded your dreams. So right now, has it exceeded what you thought you would be?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, if you go back to the dark days and you just said, hey, right, you know, in 20 years or whatever, you're going to be, I would have said, what, you know, are you taking? Right? What I'm saying. But, you know, it is about the work, you know, and one of the things that I really love about my journey is that it really shows that, look, you know, we can turn things around. It is about choices. It is about ownership of what we're doing. It is about getting the right people around you. It is about really working at it, you know, to be more, you know, then you can help other people be more. And if we all do that, you know, we have a wonderful environment for everyone.
So then, briefly, a pearl of wisdom that you would pass on to somebody else listening now.
I always say just to always do the next right thing. I mean, there's one thing, Nana, look, you know, I've got something wonderful coming up, which is Flowcoin, which is, you know, it's a decentralised currency. But, you know, apart from that, I'm the brand ambassador for this charity, and they're putting a lot of money into this on their way to be regulated. But what this means for the inner cities, you know, for boxing clubs, for women's shelters, for all these wonderful charities that don't have money, is we're going to be able to do a lot of work with them. So I'm super excited about that too, I have to say.
So this is a charitable thing. If people want to find out more about that, is there somewhere they can go to find out more?
Well, it's Flowcoin, and look, you know, there's going to be a lot out about this. Yeah, in January. I don't want to, you know, I want to focus on the good stuff here.
Okay.
But this is to empower people, and we need that, right?
We need it, Steve.
This is the thing that we need to help us change as well. So.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you too. It really is. Thank you.
That, of course, is the inspirational Stephen Gillan. He's a gangster turned CEO and a very successful man too. Interesting. We'll look forward to how we're looking out for this Flowcoin thing. It sounds great. If you just joined me, it's 22 minutes after 5 o'clock. Coming up, I'll be joined by lots of other people. We'll be doing a Great British Debate this hour. We'll be discussing whether online GP appointment booking systems are fit for purpose. You'll probably know whether you've called up your GP or you've struggled to find out how to get in touch and get your appointment. Stay with me.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. This is GB News, 26 after 5 o'clock. It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. If you've just joined me, I'm Nana Akua, and I'm asking, is the online GP appointment booking system fit for purpose? Now, the effectiveness of the online GP appointment booking system is under scrutiny as health officials face accusations of neglecting the obligation for patients to have multiple ways to schedule appointments, including by phone or face-to-face. Now, research from the campaign group Silver Voices revealed that one in 6 practices flagrantly breach the terms of the GP contract, requiring all bookings to be made exclusively online. Now, this situation leaves vulnerable individuals, particularly those without tech or internet access, excluded from healthcare access. But despite NHS England explicitly stating that patients have the right to book appointments over the phone, health officials seem quite unresponsive to the feedback. But as GP appointment waiting times soar, and as we enter the winter months, this issue could get much worse. So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the online GP appointment system fit for purpose? Well, joining me now, Dr Lawrence Gurlis, a GP in central London, Peter Spencer, political commentator, Lois Perry, social commentator and Car26 director, and Dr Anita Raja, who is a GP. Well, I'm going to start with you, Anita, if you wouldn't... so I'm presuming you're a GP. What are your thoughts on this? A lot of older people in particular are complaining about this online booking systems.
I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a complete faff for older people to, go online and book an appointment when they are not tech savvy, and it's so ever so difficult for them to go online and do that because they don't know how to use Google, the internet. They probably don't have an account, and some of them don't even have smartphones. So I certainly think that if we are talking about the elderly population, then it is an inconvenience. And most practices still have the they still have the ability to book in appointments via the telephone. But then again, you need to ask the government. They've spent £240 million on cloud telephony, a system which they think is going to tackle the healthcare problem, the crisis, the GP appointment crisis. And certainly, I mean, they're splurging money right, left, center into the wrong areas. We certainly need to address this. And yes, you're right. I mean, it's a big problem, and we see this all the time.
Dr. Lawrence Gurlis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My view on this, I think it's wrong to insist that all appointments have to be made online. I'm a great fan of technology, and I think technology is a great advance. You have to remember that this system replaces the old ATM queuing, where people had to phone up at ATM, get in a telephone queue, and by the time they got through at 8:45, all the appointments had gone. So this is an improvement on that system, where, and up till recently, that was the only way you could get an appointment with a GP. I think you have to be flexible. I've heard stories, quite hilarious stories, of patients going into a surgery, trying to book in front of the receptionist, saying, no, I can't book an appointment. You have to stand there and email me from your phone, which is clearly a nonsense. And you've got to be flexible, and you've got to be patient friendly. I'm in the private sector, so it's different for us. We answer phone calls within 2 or 3 rings, and it's amazing how many patients, not just the elderly, but young people, say, isn't it nice to talk to a human being? Because people sometimes have a simple question they want to ask about your availability, about their situation. They don't need to go online and book an appointment or even send an inquiry, which may not be answered till later in that day. So ideally, you should do both. I understand the pressures in the NHS, but most of our patients prefer to speak to a human being most of the time.
Well, that's totally. Peter Spencer.
Well, I mean, I think behind all this, there is a reality that 1 in 10 GP practices have closed down in the last 10 years. Millions of people who actually do manage to do the 8 o'clock nonsense, they then got to wait a fortnight for their appointments anyway. So I would suggest that anything that speeds up the process has got to be a help. I'd also add, actually, that during the pandemic, a great many older people got a lot more tech savvy because they had to. The only way they were going to get any FaceTime with their relatives was to actually was to figure out how to work a computer and look down a screen. So I think that on balance, this is more helpful than unhelpful. Of course, stuff can go wrong, and I entirely take the last speaker's point about the private sector is under so much less pressure. But so be it, the NHS is up against it. And I have to say that healthcare, a little bit like politics, is the art of the possible.
Yeah, but it's such a pain, isn't it? Like, it's too complex, all the things that you have to do to try and get that appointment. Lois Perry.
Right, well, I would argue that it's the NHS that's not fit for purpose. I mean, there's lots and lots of ways of making the NHS work better, breaking it down into component parts without privatising it. In Israel, for example, they have 4 competing state-funded health providers, and Israel has got one of the best healthcare systems in the world. So, but the thing that I would also say, it's all very well what the doctor before me said. However, my nan is extremely tech savvy. She orders stuff online, she can FaceTime, but especially if she was ill, she would struggle to use she's 87 and she would struggle to use the online booking service. And she's very fortunate because where she is, you ring, they answer, and it's NHS. And they actually came out to see her recently when she was very unwell. So, and the other thing as well with regards to a video consult, where you actually see the doctor. I've spoken to a very good friend of mine who's a GP, and I don't know if the other doctors on this agree with me, but he said that people who've got early stage cancer have a particular smell. I know it sounds terrible, but that's what he said. And he said that he would not be able to do that on a video diagnosis, So I just thought that might...
There are lots of there are lots of things that don't work online. But I just want to quickly then come to you all. First, I'll come to Lawrence. So, is the GP online booking service fit for purpose in your eyes? Yes or no?
Not if it's exclusive. So the answer is no. You have to have a choice of systems to access the GP. No.
Peter Spencer, same to you.
I'd say yes, it is, although I do take that last point. Of course, the NHS say you're supposed to have a choice, and you jolly well should.
Lois Perry, yes or no?
Yeah, no, not at all.
And Anita Raja, Dr. Anita Raja.
I would say that it depends who we're talking about. If it's for the elderly patients who are not tech savvy, then definitely no. But for the young ones who can use the internet, it definitely is.
Well, thank you very much for your thoughts. Lois Perry, Peter Spencer, Dr. Loris Gurlis and Dr. Anita Raja. I just think the whole online thing is just such a pain in the backside. I can't bear it having to book like that. It feels like you have to take sort of time out to concentrate to do it. But you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We'll continue on the way. Our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is the online GP appointment booking system fit for purpose? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, also author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. But first, let's get your latest news with Sophia.
Thank you, Nana. It's 5:33. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. GB News understands tomorrow Tory MPs will give their verdict on whether the Rwanda bill is workable. Conservative MP Sir Bill Cash will present the findings ahead of the crunch second vote on Tuesday. The Prime Minister has come under pressure after it was discovered he paid £240 million towards the Rwanda plan without a single flight taking off. Tory sources say the MPs will decide whether to support the legislation tomorrow or, if necessary, hold a second meeting ahead of the vote that evening. Met Police say 2 teenage girls have been arrested on suspicion of robbery after a woman was attacked in London. A warning, this video shows distressing images. Footage of the attack has been circulating on social media, showing the 20-year-old walking in Stamford Hill and then being robbed and beaten. The woman, who is from the Orthodox Jewish community, was reportedly left bruised but did not need to go to hospital. Met Police say it's keeping an open mind about the motive for the attack, but are treating it as a possible hate crime. Baroness Michelle Mone says she made an error in publicly denying her links to the PPE firm MedPro. It was awarded government contracts worth more than £200 million to supply personal protective equipment after she recommended it to ministers. The National Crime Agency is investigating the firm and its connection to the Conservative peer. Lady Mone argues she is being used as a scapegoat by the government for its own COVID failings. McDonald's has apologised after footage posted on social media showed a security guard mopping the floor where a homeless man was sitting. The video was taken on Victoria Street in London last night and shows the man trying to move his sleeping bag and duvet away from the water as it seeped underneath. In the video, he says, "Leave me alone," before one security guard kicks a blanket out of the way and splashes more water along the pavement. McDonald's said it was shocked and saddened by the footage. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Sophia. Coming up, could we see a return from former Prime Minister Boris Johnson? Some Conservative MPs are reportedly contemplating an extraordinary plan to bring back Boris. And alongside Nigel Farage, would a Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage be the dream ticket? But next, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is the online GP appointment booking system fit for purpose? Let me know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet?
What is this?
It's my new
t-shirt. It's your new t-shirt.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 40 minutes after 5 o'clock. If you just tuned in, you've come in at the end of the show. What a one! Don't worry, though. We've got 20 minutes to go. I'm Nana Akua. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. This is GB News. Now, don't forget, make sure you download the I'm a Celebrity app and cast your 5 free votes for Nigel. Let us make him king of the jungle. They will hate that. Won't they just hate it? They didn't want him to do it, so come on. We'll put the QR code on the screen there. It's right there. All you need to do is just take a photograph of that, and then you can click on it and go straight to the I'm a Celebrity app. Right, it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is the online GP appointment booking system fit for purpose? The effectiveness of the system is under scrutiny as health officials face accusations of neglecting their obligation for patients to have multiple ways to make appointments. Research from the campaign group Silver Voices revealed that 1 in 6 practices flagrantly breach the terms of the GP contract, requiring bookings to be made exclusively online and, of course, leaving vulnerable people without access to healthcare. So what's it like for you? Because we know that waiting times are soaring. We know there's an issue with a lot of the GP surgeries. People can't get appointments. What are your thoughts? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the online GP appointment booking system fit for purpose? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Danny Kelly, I'm going to start with you. You're a fit man. You never need to go to the GP.
Did you say fit or fat? Normally it's...
I said it in between.
She said fit.
It's a rare man.
Well, I think if so many people over a certain age are finding it difficult to get a face-to-face appointment, and if it's online only, if you have to go through this triage system almost before you actually get medically triaged, then it can't be fit for purpose. There'll be people who
aren't comfortable with technology. We need to accept and understand that. There'll be people who are younger than. By the way, it worries me that silver surfers. What do they call themselves?
Silver surfers.
They look after people who are over 60. Oh my God, we're rapidly approaching 60, and I'm part of a silver surfer type of guy.
It's usually described because of the colour of their hair, so I think you're safe.
Oh, I see. A big fat bald man as well as. So it can't be fit for purpose. Look, I'm not going to go through my medical conditions live on air.
Oh, do.
Okay, all right. I've got a pimple on my...
What's wrong with you? Everything.
Yes. I've got a nasal condition.
No, we're only joking. Well, go on.
I've got a nasal condition, and I think it's the cats at home that cause it.
What,
and
they going up in your nose?
Allergic to cats.
Is your cat going like this in your nose?
I have constantly a blocked nose.
Neil's allergic to cats.
Yeah, blocked nostril. It's like a sinusitis type thing.
He gets runny eyes, he has to leave the room, or the cat has to go.
I can message my doctor. You can't get through to your doctor nowadays.
No,
you can't speak to him.
Get it.
You have to go through reception or secretaries or whatever. I can message through the NHS app my doctor. I did so last week, saying, "Doctor, thanks for the prescription, still clogged nose or whatever." Next day, another prescription. And then I go to Boots and pick it up. So for me, that aspect of modern technology and GP appointment works fabulously. But if older people, forget the old thing, but if people can't get through, then it's not fit for purpose.
The trouble is you can't forget the old thing, because who goes to the doctor most regularly? Older people. And the older you get, as I know, as I'm not approaching 60, way past, the older you get, the more problems you have. And I think it's a gross insult for any practice to think that everybody has access to technology and can use it. I'm very lucky. Our surgery, they're very good. They're well organised. They've got practice managers. They've got farmers. Everything is. We're very, very lucky. You do still have to go through. I hate this word, triage, but obviously you have to say why you want to see the doctor. I mean, my father was a GP, and the number of time wasters who would come in, because he was such a darling man, they would just come in and have a chat to the doctor, and it took them 10 minutes to get, what were the... So obviously you have to do that. But any practice that is breaking their GP contract should be pulled up and made to give people all the various options for booking an appointment.
It's almost like when you go to those websites where they never tell you the phone number, so you have to go and look. That's how it feels when you're doing that, because I actually tried to do an online sort of appointment, which ended up being not a face-to-face, but like a sort of, like a consultation, but online. But I had to book it, and I went online, and I couldn't work out what they meant, because the way the navigation was actually quite awkward. So I was like, well, do I press that one or that one? And I did that one, and it went back there. And I spent about 2 hours, and this is no joke, trying to work out, navigate the site itself. And eventually, I called them up. Then they said, "Oh, have you got your online?" Then I had to go, and they guided me through the thing. And I thought, oh my God! If I was older and more informed,
well, exactly.
Well, I'm quite old, but if I was older, it's harder.
And they ask you a question, is the answer yes or no? And you think, well, actually, it's neither yes nor no. It's in between. I need to talk to somebody. I need a box where I can explain. I mean, of course, we've got to move with the times. And, I mean, the NHS app is absolutely brilliant. You just go on there and you click the things you want re-prescribed, and as the older you get, the more there are. And it happens. And it's what hospitals should do. Hospitals need to... what is the word? Not mechanise.
Modernise.
Modernise. There's a word for internetise, whatever it is. And more and more surgeries have to do that. I mean, a well-managed surgery that uses their budget carefully and sensibly, should be no problem, apart from the fact that population is increasing so massively that every surgery has more people to cope with.
It's a bit like a COVID hangover, where they don't really want to sort of see you, so they've sort of got hooked on this not face-to-face thing. But, well, let's see what our viewers at home think of that, because, of course, this show is nothing without you and your views, so let's welcome our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. And today I've got three of you. David Palm, I'll start with you. David.
Hello, Nan and team. Actually, I've got two things I can talk about. First, our surgery is brilliant. You can use online if you want, but you have to go through a triage, no problem. Last year, after the marathon this year, I hurt my back, and I was advised to go to the musculoskeletal clinic, and I had to fill an online consultation. And on that online consultation, you have to mark where you hurt, but he couldn't mark where it hurt. And so then I got a phone call that didn't actually understand what the problem was. And so I explained I actually couldn't mark on the thing where the pain was because it was in 4 different places. Oh, we better get you to come in. They could have have avoided all that by making a freaking phone call.
It's true, isn't it?
So it works occasionally. Like everything, good signs and bad signs. I'm very lucky with our surgery; they're great. And I am one of the old people. I am a silver surfer down there, and trust me, I have trouble. So no problem.
Well, you're silver surfer without silver hair, so that's not a bad
No, I've got a silver beard. That's all.
Adrian Gell.
Yeah, I'm actually quite impressed that Christine can get online and even tick some boxes.
Cheek of that cheek of it.
Adrian. If I want to get over the doctor's surgery here, I've got a telephone and I'm held in a queue, and then if I'm lucky, I might get to see the doctor within 2 weeks. As for going online and getting an appointment, I don't even think we have that system in our surgery here.
Well,
and part of it's all to do, rather like, as I mentioned last week, the bloated civil service. I think that the NHS is bloated with management, and there are far too many layers.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, that's definitely a discussion for another day, but I think most people will agree with you there. Philip Hoy.
Hi, Nana. Well, we do have the system where you can do online booking, but unfortunately, what I found with it is that it's best for younger people who've got not particularly medical emergency or something like that. They may want injections because you will always have a long time to wait. You can never get a quick appointment, number one. And quite often, if you do get an appointment, then it's quickly cancelled because somebody's not going to be there. What I do is I phone up. I use the 8 o'clock in the morning appointment. I fight with everybody else to get on. And, you phone at 5 seconds to 8 and it's not online. And then you phone again at 1 second past 8 and you suddenly 8th in the queue, which I've never understood, but there you go.
Well,
but I have to admit that what we do is we phone up. You have I'm going to say a triage system where you can phone up in the afternoon and say, I wish to speak to a doctor, and at some point a doctor will phone you back.
Well, the thing is,
having described
it's so random, is it? The whole thing's so random. One works, another one doesn't. It's not good enough. David Barham in Watford, thank you very much. Philip Hoy in Hertfordshire, Adrian Gell, thank you so much. Well, that's their thoughts. I'm going to thank Anne Mulhern. Thank you so much for bringing that story to my attention, by the way. She went on my little Facebook group and told me all about it, and I think we needed to talk about it, so thank you so much for that. I love it when you send me something and we talk about it. So, right, well, this story, they caught my eye today. Amidst concerns over declining Tory support and the Reform Party rise, some Conservative MPs are reportedly contemplating an extraordinary plan to bring back Boris Johnson as Prime Minister in a leadership tie-up with Nigel Farage. Of course, Nigel hopefully be crowned king of the jungle. Of course, Rishi Sunak faces loads of challenges over Rwanda and everything else, pretty much. So what do you think? Could you see the return to power for our former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, with Nigel Farage in tow as the dream ticket? I'm going to ask you, first of all, Christine, briefly.
Well, they're two enormous egos, aren't they? Nigel and Boris. And I can't remember the question, but no, the answer's no. I cannot see those two working together.
No, I think Nigel has the upper hand politically now. I think Boris Johnson's damaged goods.
Well, Boris has been.
Yeah, and I think that would be counterproductive. I think if the Tories can get Farage on board, I think that's a good thing. But I think Johnson's damaged goods. And by the way, you can tiptoe yourself around technology. Of course you can.
All right, well, listen, now it's
time. Of course I can, thank you.
Right, well, it's now time for Supplement Sunday. This is a part of the show where we talk about the stories that have caught our eye. We'll start with Christine Hamilton. Now, yours is about 21 million suffering injuries preparing for Christmas. So this is a piece that's health and safety. 21 million suffer injuries preparing for Christmas.
Yeah, well, this I found quite extraordinary. As you said, 21 million people. I can't work it out. I'm never quite sure what the population is
You've only
nowadays.
got about 30 seconds.
Anyway, 21 million. That's a huge percentage of the population injure themselves, either putting up the tree or the decorations or whatever. So be careful out there.
Okay. Do you have one for us? What have you got?
Yes, I have. Woke police madness as Scottish cops get rid of Wall of Honour because it has too many men on it. Basically, in a police headquarters, there's a Wall of Honour with all the ex-police chiefs, their portraits, their photographs. It's been removed because they're all white men. and there's no diversity. But this is an historic fact. The police chiefs have all been white blokes, and they've been told to strip them off the wall because there's no diversity. Someone throwing the misogyny card at them.
To strip the white blokes off the wall.
That's absurd.
Strip them off the wall.
They're paintings, they're photographs, portraits.
Well, all I want to say for my supplement is don't forget to download the I'm a Celebrity app and vote for Nigel Farage, because I'd love to see the faces of Ant and Dec if he should win King of the Jungle. What do you think?
I should think they are already, goodness knows what the expression is, but they will be amazed, astonished and horrified that he's got as far as he's got.
They can't stand
I know.
I can't wait for the Lorraine interview, because ITV contractually have to interview all of the evictees. I cannot wait. Farage is going to tear a strip off her.
Well, she should explain.
No, he won't.
He's really polite.
He won't. He'll be
he will, but he'll bring up the fat shaming. Not the fat shaming, that's me. He'll bring up the age shaming.
Yes, that wasn't. But he won't tear a strip off her.
No, well, not with that.
Well, he's not like that.
He's very polite, as you know, as you can see on The Jungle. Make sure you watch him tonight, because you need to vote for him. He needs to win. It'll be hilarious to see a look on their faces. But on today's show, we've been asking, is the Rwanda scheme a gimmick? According to our Twitter poll, 83.9% of you say yes. I'm with you, because they've not done anything with it.
No, it's
16.1%. They put 4.9 and 0.1. The 4.1% of you say no, it isn't. Well, I'm going to say a huge thank you to my panel, Christine Hamilton, awesome broadcaster. Thank you so much, Christine.
Pleasure.
That's Danny, actually. Yes. And also thank you to you, Danny Kelly, as well. And, of course, thank you to you at home for your company. I'll leave you with the weather. See you next week on Saturday at 3.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glazier. Unsettled weather continues as low pressure remains very much in charge of our weather over the next couple of days. Storm Fergus, situated out to the west, slowly moves its way towards us through Sunday evening and into the start of Monday, bringing with it some very heavy rainfall, particularly to northern parts of England, where the ground is already very saturated, so we could see some localised flooding through the early hours of Monday morning. Some strong winds too, particularly across western Wales and through the Bristol Channel, where we could see gusts up to 60 miles an hour. Temperatures in the south generally around 7 or 8 degrees, but a much colder night across the northern parts of Scotland, where we could see some icy conditions, particularly across the southwest of Scotland through Monday morning. A cloudy start across the northern half of the UK on Monday, some showers continuing along those eastern coasts of Scotland. But generally, Monday will be a much more settled day for most of us. Plenty of sunshine as we head through the afternoon, and with some lighter winds, temperatures around 10 to 12 degrees across the south. It'll be feeling a little more pleasant than we've seen over recent days. Tuesday starts a much cloudier picture though. Rain continues to push its way northwards through Tuesday morning, again bringing some very heavy rainfall to eastern parts of Scotland, where again we could see some localised flooding due to that saturated ground. Further south there'll be plenty of heavy showers pushing in from the southwest and quite a blustery feeling day too. Remaining unsettled through Tuesday and Wednesday, but hints of something a little more settled are on the horizon through Thursday and Friday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News. Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Almost any time that people talk about woke, the question of gender issues arises. So I thought it might be best if I could speak to perhaps the most famous transgender person in the world, Caitlyn Jenner.
John, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's so nice of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I want to know what you really feel about woke.
I hate it. I am so against it. You have to realize, in being in the trans community, you think, oh my gosh, you must be.
You're not expecting that.
Yeah, you don't expect it. But I've been around a long time. I've seen a lot. I am a product of my father, who was in this country for 4 months training to invade Normandy.
He was on the beaches in Normandy?
He was the 5th Ranger Battalion. They were the first boats on Omaha Beach. He somehow survived. He even said on his deathbed, he died in 2000, he even said in his deathbed, he said, hey, I should have died a long time ago. I had a great life. I have no complaints. But he was a true American. I mean, that was the greatest generation. I am a product of that. Yeah. I'm a patriot. the United States. I love the good old U.S. of A. I'm a patriot. When I was growing up, we said the national, we did the national anthem. We had the Pledge of Allegiance that we sang. No, they don't do all that stuff anymore.
They don't do the Pledge of Allegiance?
No, not anymore in schools. And it's a shame. And I've always been so proud to be an American. And in fact, I was the first person to ever put up an American flag, or a flag, any flag, at the finish line at the Olympic Games, where now everybody goes across the finish line. They have their PR guy standing there.
Yeah.
And thank you. They have their PR guy standing there, and they have the country's flag. And I started that whole thing back in 1976. It wasn't planned. A guy jumped out of the stands and gave me a flag, and I
really?
Oh my God, what do I do?
Spontaneous.
And so I've always been a very proud American, and I'm proud of our culture and everything. And I see what's happening in the woke world, and it, to be honest with you, really, really bothers me. I see the advertising world.
One end of it is sort of useful and constructive, and the other end is a bit crazy.
I would agree with that. The old saying, you go woke, you go broke, and you're seeing how advertisers are doing that. But for me, I've always been on the conservative side. When I came out, 2015, and I did Diane Sawyer, but I did it as Bruce, and it was the first interview I had done that I'd ever talked about dealing with gender dysphoria my entire life. And at the end of the interview, she goes, well, we talked about gender dysphoria and the problems with this and that and the trans community. And she goes, oh, and by the way, I was kind of surprised. I hear you're a Republican. And I went, I was kind of surprised by the question, but I go, yeah, we have Democrats, we have Republicans. I've always been on the conservative side. I've been, and she goes, well, that's very surprising. I got more flack for being a Republican than I did for being trans. Yeah, I've always been that way, and I've always been involved in politics in some way. Lately, more because there's so many political issues.
You recently stood for governor.
I did. This was a year and a half ago, whatever it was now. There was a recall election going on in California. I've lived in California since 1973, been there a long time. I remember driving my 1963 VW Bug. I just graduated